What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome back, gang. Relatively on-time start out of the gate here after the All-Star break. Had projections in up bright and early this morning. Got right into it. Got a full update in and the model on the back end. Totally caught up to things that are going on, things that are gonna happen, things that are probably gonna happen, things that might happen, things that probably won't happen. It's all in there. We're going to take a look through all of it for a pretty solid 11-game slate returning to action. Hopefully everybody had a good All-Star break. I can't think of one single thing that's important to talk about that happened over the last 10 days or so since we last spoke. Definitely a completely uneventful week and nothing to see here. But yeah, let's just dive right into the slate. It was a fun All-Star break. It was a fun little home run derby. It was a fun... Where's the Excel sheet? It was a okay All-Star game, I'll say. Wasn't a great All-Star game, but it was all right. A couple of good days off in terms of not just not doing shows and stuff. Taking it relatively easy. Joker's still having a problem with his itchies over in the corner. As soon as I started talking, he jumped over into his little bed here and started gnawing on his side. Hey, buddy. Joker, you want to cut that out? Good boy. Nobody needs to hear those noises. So like I said, we've got an interesting 11-gamer, but let's say hi to everybody. Cujo's here. What's up, Cujo? Cujo's still on vacation, coming back on Tuesday. Hope you have a great trip, buddy. Not sure where you're at or if it's a staycation at home or whatever, but I hope you're enjoying it. Always good to spend time with the fam. Stephen B's here. Colin Sutherland. Colin had his aunt and his cousin in. Yearly trip from Denver made the week a lot less hectic. Stephen Leibowitz, can we go over the rules of baseball for a refresher? Not bad. Anthony Taylor, let's get back to it. DFS family, enjoy vacation, Cujo. Yep, agreed. Dimitri's here, Lone Wolf's here. This is not our first game up. That honor goes to the Rays and the Yankees. We've got an interesting one to talk about. It's to start with, a pretty deep pitching slate. A lot of teams just at the top of their rotation coming out of a week-plus long break, outside of some guys who pitched in the game over the break. But by and large, we've got a lot of number ones going. We've got a lot of solid number two type pitchers going. Reasonable cut lines in, I'll say, like this territory. And then another one somewhere around here-ish. Here, maybe. So there's a lot of options, a lot of high-end, very expensive pitchers in pretty good-looking spots. A lot of opportunities to succeed. It's going to be an interesting one to talk through there. Vegas board is kind of reflective of that. A lot of really low totals through those early games. Picks up a little bit in the nightcap, particularly with a Coors Field game. That one's obviously a beast with 10.5 runs in that one. 5.66 on the Giants side, and then 4.96 on the Rockies side. We'll get into that rundown. But starting up at the top, we've got an 8-run total in the Bronx. Garrett Cole going for the Yanks, keeping the Rays down to a 3.58 implied total, projecting out pretty well against a team that certainly has some strikeouts available in it. On the other side, it's Zach Eflin going for the Rays. Yanks at a respectable enough 4.51 implied total. They've been up and down this season. We all know what the issues are. They've got some interesting bats still in that lineup. They've got a lot of affordability baked into that lineup, and obviously two superstars in it. So always in consideration, more so in home games in Yankee Stadium, helps out a little bit. But the Yanks are on the board as one of the mid-level teams. Tigers and the Blue Jays. This one, Jack Flaherty, undeniable at the top of the board. As far as everybody was projecting out, I don't usually love having the top of the board be a pitcher going up against a relatively low strikeout Blue Jays team, but he's earned that projection this season. He's been very, very good throughout most of the season. He's had some very high strikeout games. He's had some good stuff this year, so Flaherty looking really solid at the top. And then on the other side, Chris Bassett, no reason to believe really that he couldn't succeed against a pretty mediocre Tigers team. 3.72 implied total for Detroit, 3.86 implied total on the other side for Toronto. Tanner Bybee going for the Guardians, going up against Matt Waldron for the Padres. Another relatively low total on the Padres side, just 3.61 implied runs, and then a solid 4.48 puts the Guardians on the board in the middle of the group of appealing teams. Almost said in the middle, on the board in the middle of the board. But it puts them like right around par with the Yankees, probably somewhere in that territory. I think Oakland falls into kind of around that territory. We'll get to that one in a little bit. But you can just kind of go by the run totals a little bit today as a cheat sheet. Obviously we've got some teams that are good teams at low totals, but I think the runs are somewhat revealing about where the quality might be DFS-wise today, even more so than I like to do it normally, as far as just straight lining that. Carrying on down the board, the Mets at the Marlins originally had Sean Manaea, but it looks like it is actually Jose Quintana going for the Mets. I actually forgot to change that in my game logs here, so we won't have Jose Quintana's game log fired up, but we'll get it when we need it. 3.83 implied total for the hometown Marlins. And then Edward Cabrera, kind of interesting coming in. Talented guy, fair price, going up against a pretty good Mets lineup. He's got them at a 4.26. That's not a crazy total, but it's not a low total relative to the other ones on the slate. So he's one to consider. We haven't seen him at his best, but he's got a lot of talent. So it's a consideration for a value option, but there are a lot of good value options on the board. Speaking of, Spencer Schwellenbach going for the Braves up against a mediocre, middle-of-the-board type Cardinals team. 3.71 implied total for them. Schwelly's got a little bit of strikeout upside. And then going back the other way, for the Cardinals, it's Sonny Gray going up against a high strikeout Braves lineup. So he looks like an appealing pitcher as well from the top of the board from the high price zone. 3.71 for the Cards, 3.88 for the Braves. Orioles and the Rangers, 3.89 implied total for the Orioles going up against Nathan Eovaldi. Corbin Burns going for the Orioles has Texas down at just a 3.69 implied total. Looks like a good spot to mine some high-end pitching for, maybe people lay off a little bit for the matchups against those opponents, where it's still a very appealing spot for both of those pitchers. But I was saying the Orioles look a little bit better in the model than they might in that Vegas total. A little bit of power showing, a little bit of projection showing from the Orioles. They've got both Gunnar and Santander above the magic number in that one against Eovaldi, with some other guys showing a little bit of pop. So might be looking at other side that Orioles part of it a little bit. But I think Eovaldi's playable at worst, and Corbin Burns is top level. The White Sox and the Royals, a relatively high run total, and this one at 9 runs overall, the second highest on the board behind the 10.5 that we've got in Coors Field in the next game. 5.45 implied total for Kansas City. That looks like a very targetable spot going up against Chris Flexen. And then Michael Wacha, probably a little bit playable. He's got the White Sox down at just a 3.67. They've been one of our favorite targets all year long, so no reason to at least not consider Wacha for some shares from the mid-range. The Giants kind of pushing their way up to the top based on the 5.66 implied total. If we're doing it just by straight line DFS projection, actual average, does it actually math out to the very top spot? No, I had to move them up a little bit, but it was from like 4 to like 1, and I think that's justified, to reflect that monster run total as compared to basically everybody else on the board. If you're going by that, Kansas City, Colorado is your Kansas City, San Francisco is your stack, obviously. Two teams well above 5, nobody else approaching that. The next closest team is Colorado on the other side of this Coors Field game. They're going up against Kyle Harrison. They do have a bunch of interesting right-handed power bats that are very cheap that people tend not to play. They hit down lineup, so it's less than ideal most of the time with guys like Michael Talia and Hunter Goodman and so on and so forth. But there is a ton of power-based upside in that lineup. 4.96 is not a bad total at all on this slate. Definitely appeal there. And as usual, the Rockies get the benefit of Coors Field and not really the popularity of the opposing team. A lot of that has to do with how bad the Rockies are, of late. But it's a better Rockies team than it's been, at least for DFS. It's more interesting for DFS. So I think it's an appealing enough spot there. Angels and the Athletics. I referred to this one a little bit obliquely before. We've got JP Sears going for the Athletics, which pushes enough upside toward the Angels that they're at least on the board a little bit at 4.13 implied total. 8.5 runs for the game. And then coming back the other way, one of our favorite targets overall, Griffin Canning going against the Athletics. They're showing a bunch of power upside against him. He gives up home runs like crazy. He beat this team pretty handily back on the 24th, 4 starts ago. Went 7 innings, gave up 5 hits, just 1 earned run on a homer, 5 strikeouts, 1 walk. Not a dominant start, but a good value start for DFS purposes, so it worked out in his favor that time. Since that start, he's given up 4 runs twice. He gave up 2 earned runs in his most recent start. That was against Texas, but that came on 7 hits, 3 strikeouts, 2 walks, and a homer. Just went 4 1/3 in that one. He's a highly, highly gettable pitcher who gives up a ton of power. So leaning into the Athletics value a little bit, there are some interesting bats. We've seen them explode for big run totals and home run output even just recently in Philadelphia. So there's enough appeal there. Lawrence Butler, the home run pick of the day. Astros at the Mariners, a very low total at just 7 runs in this one. Dead even on the base. Well, not dead even, but good enough for government work. Hunter Brown going for the Astros against Luis Castillo for the Mariners. Looks like a good spot to grab some pitching. Obviously, we like attacking the Mariners a lot more than we like attacking the Astros. Just generally speaking, the Astros, if nothing else, are pretty low strikeout, while the Mariners are one of the worst strikeout teams in baseball. I think that's just kind of how the public's going to lean, though. I feel like Hunter Brown's going to be picking up a ton of ownership. Garrett Cole's going to get really popular, and then everybody else just kind of falls around the edges. Luis Castillo definitely in consideration on the other side of that one, and very, very justifiable. And then your nightcap, Nick Pivetta going for the Bo Sox against Gavin Stone. Both teams, I think we could grab some offense in this one from either side. I could see both of these pitchers, though, pitching to around these totals. A 5-4 type ball game. The starters each gave up 3-4 runs. Nobody had a great DFS day. Nobody had a great offensive DFS day. Going back the other way from the Red Sox or the Dodgers lineup. But we do have a lot of very high-end bats. We have 2 at least gettable pitchers. So we're going to have to at least consider it, and if it gets unpopular toward the end of the night, which it probably won't given the names involved, it is worth, pushing up a little bit in consideration, especially when you consider outside of, this group of teams here, there's really not that much difference between the 4-1-7 that the Dodgers are getting and say maybe a little bit more difference between these two, but not all that much between them and the Mets. There's not that much difference. 3.90, despite being below 4, is still one of the better run totals among all of these in yellow. So I think there's a little bit of sneaky appeal here hidden at the end of the night. 8-run total, it just matches some of these earlier ones. But 2 very good lineups against 2 gettable pitchers. So it's an interesting rundown on this one. Show started at a good time. All the diehards were on in a row, and we're currently on 4, which is how was it called? Die Hard. John McClane's Immortal now. I forget what the hell the subtitle for this one was, but this is where it started to get a little bit shaky. We just finished up the one with Sam Jackson a few minutes ago, so I'm glad the show started for this. But to get into it, like I was saying, I don't love having a pitcher against Toronto, just given their fairly low strikeout nature at the top of the board. But 97.95, it's a very nice price. I don't think that the projection is unrealistic for Jack Flaherty. You've got a real big handful of guys that all look exactly the same projection-wise from here through here, which is kind of interesting. And then Flaherty a few points beyond all of those guys. So I do think he's worth reaching for. He's had a high-quality season. He's a very talented pitcher. Just a little bit of a challenging matchup as far as finding the strikeouts, but finding depth, maybe not getting to a win. We'll see what happens there, but a quality start, a lot of depth, limited hits, and strikeout upside, just his personal strikeout upside even in that matchup, he has appeal. And if he goes under-owned as compared to a lot of the other high-end pitchers on the board, so much the better. So I'll take my shots there. Sonny Gray, no issues with playing him against the high strikeout Atlanta team, 10-4, 9,200. Reasonably priced on both sites. The second most expensive pitcher on FanDuel behind Corbin Burns, who's 300 more from a 0.04 of a FanDuel point lower projection. And then Garrett Cole for a much cheaper price stands a little bit higher projection-wise on the FanDuel slate, slightly behind on the DraftKings slate. 9,600, 9,000 is very, very reasonable for Garrett Cole going up against this Rays team. He hasn't been the highest-end version of Garrett Cole, but it seems like it is slowly rounding into form as he's made some more high-stress major league starts. So hopefully we get the peak version of Cole against a very, very gettable Rays squad with some strikeouts in it. I think you can absolutely fire away with extreme shares of any of those individuals or a very solid mix of those 4 guys as just your spend-up pitchers. I have a little bit less faith in Tanner Bybee. It's another matchup for him against San Diego that there's a couple very good just contact-focused bats in there. He's not the peak strikeout ace type that some of these other guys are, and they're very low strikeout over all the Padres, so it's not a great matchup. I believe in him. I believe in the projection, and again, this projection is almost, there's no difference between Bybee's projection and Gray's or Burns or Cole or Brown or Bassett for that matter. A lot of B's in that group. I just have a little bit less faith in Bybee's ability to consistently deliver. I think it renders him lower owned by comparison, but the ownership, I don't know that the lower ownership necessarily outweighs the potential downside. And it's not really a blow-up downside. It's just a maybe somewhat matchup-based limited ceiling type of a downside. Hunter Brown, I think, is a terrific option against Seattle. I just think he's going to get popular. 9,100, and then especially on DraftKings at 84. He's going to be super popular on DraftKings. Talented pitcher, good strikeout pitcher, a lot of upside, really delivering on his talent through most of his starts this year, and one of the better matchups in baseball, the more exploitable matchups in baseball. I think you can absolutely fire away. Just be aware that you need to pivot some to gain some leverage elsewhere in your lineup. Go with a different secondary stack. It's a very big slate. There's a lot of bats to choose from that won't be owned at all. So it's, again, I don't think you have to get hung up too much on individual ownership. It's more about combination. It's more about your construction path. Don't put it together with the most common bats from the most common stacks. Get a little bit of creativity into it. Get a little bit of flex into it. Use tools, use sims, use randomization. Continuing down the line, Chris Bassett again against a very gettable Tiger squad. I can see him succeeding. A lot of depth on the board with Bassett in most of his starts. 91.81, very reasonable pricing. Waka against Chicago, another team that is just super targetable with pitching. 8,900 is reasonable on FanDuel. 8,200 is a bargain on DraftKings. Then we get to Schwelly, who is only 7,600 on DraftKings. That sets him apart as an extreme value option. 8,200 on the FanDuel slate also really differentiates him from a lot of other pitchers. I do think he'll gain a little bit of mid-range popularity as a value play, but I don't think he's going to be over the top popular compared to a lot of these other options on the board. So I think he's a really interesting one. There are definitely some bats in that Cards lineup that he's going to have to avoid. But he's a talented kid, and he's found some strikeout upside in his recent run of games. He hasn't been the most reliable as far as limiting runs. It's not a safe play, but it gets you a lot of bats, and you don't have to go to the bottom of the barrel with these types. Luis Castillo, just again, tougher matchup against Houston, and he's been a little bit more erratic this season as compared to some of the other guys. Falls a little bit short projection-wise of the rest of the top of the board. At 93 on FanDuel, I don't love him in comparison to these guys. At 82 on DraftKings, I think he fits nicely into this group at worst. So a very different play across sites, but I would not say it's a mistake to play Luis Castillo in any matchup, really. He's a very, very good pitcher. Nick Pivetta against the Dodgers, I think, is a little bit more targetable than Castillo is with the Astros. I would much rather play Dodgers bats against Pivetta. But that said, Pivetta can succeed against this Dodgers team. We were just looking at it before. They're slightly above 4 implied runs at the end of the night. Reason enough to consider him at 87, 88. But you can see the gap in projection is starting to grow as we get down toward Nick Pivetta. And if you're drawing a pitcher from the mid-range, you really want to target the Dodgers. Even if Vegas is saying it's not an explosive spot, they're definitely good enough to hang a few runs on him. Same thing with Nathan Eovaldi against Baltimore. It's just kind of a why do you want to target it? Not a he can't succeed, not a he can't exceed these median projections. But with all these options on the board, are we really thinking the guy facing one of the best lineups in baseball is really the best option? It's a little challenging for Eovaldi, but you can absolutely see him succeeding. You could see him winning the slate. He does have that kind of upside. Waldron's just been an effective pitcher. Not a ton of strikeout upside individually, not a ton of strikeout upside matchup based. 91.86 just feels pricey. I feel like he could maybe get you to the quality start just on innings and limiting a few runs, but doesn't feel like a play with a lot of ceiling on it on either site, especially at those prices. Should just always be cheaper. Is not this kind of a pitcher, but effective enough and has had some nice DFS scores through the season. So I think he just falls by the wayside. He'll 100% be very unowned. 100% be unowned. That was clunky. He's not going to be popular. Jose Quintana pitching against the Marlins in Miami. Spectacular Pitchers Park. Good enough to throw some darts at. 87 on FanDuel, I don't think you look at, but 7,300 on DraftKings is an SP2 value dart. Definitely there. Eflin, just another why you really want to. 75, I get it price-wise, but do you really want to throw it at the Yankees in Yankee Stadium on not the warmest night, but definitely warm still here in the New York area? I don't think it's the right Eflin spot. JP Sears against LA. You could probably get away with a few Sears darts. 7,000 on FanDuel. I found just an ability to get to bats that I wanted just using Schwellenbach at 82. So I don't know that I mean, you can definitely buy a much more expensive one-off if you wanted. There's things to do with that salary savings, but I don't know that it's as close to gap pitching-wise as it might seem. JP Sears, not that great. Succeeds from time to time. 6,300 is a little bit bigger of a value on DraftKings, and you have to play the second pitcher. So I think he's got a little bit more utility here than here, but it's limited overall. Gavin Stone against Boston. It's another one that just falls into the mix of I don't love him at this price on FanDuel. 8,800 against the Red Sox. Feels a little bit high, even with them checked under 4 runs. 78 on DraftKings just doesn't really fit into the pricing mix compared to a lot of these guys. So I think Stone just kind of falls off the board a little. Canning, I'm mostly targeting, but I get it if you do want to throw a few darts at 5,800. Like I said, he did have a good start against this Oakland squad just a few games ago, and he does have from time to time good stuff and was a much better pitcher in seasons past. I just like targeting him with bats more often than not, and I think the A's are an interesting value angle today. Edward Cabrera, I could see him succeeding from down here. This is one that I actually think is maybe an interesting $6,600 dart to throw on DraftKings. He's probably more interesting than like Sears. It's a tough matchup, but he does have talent. I'm more inclined to throw him than anybody below him. Definitely not Quantrill, Flexen, Kyle Harrison at Coors Field. No, thank you. All these guys pretty much off the board. KC pulling the second highest implied total on the slate. These guys pitching at Coors Field with the highest implied totals on the slate. Just feels a little light. This one's kind of interesting. Pitching in that Miami park helps out a little bit. So at worst, we've got a lot of options. This is a deep pitching slate. Has an impact on bats, though. As we'll see as we go through this, and we saw on the Vegas board, a lot of really low numbers on there. Mamba's getting 90% Garrett Cole. Ran 10,000 lineups and 68% Cole. I do think he's going to be the most popular pitcher on either site, Mamba. So I don't think that's a crazy result to be getting from your optimizer of choice. But yeah, Manaea's not starting. This is Jose Quintana starting. Unless it changed again. I still have Jose Quintana. Why did this screen get so small? And now MLB is switched back to Sean Manaea, or did they never switch it? This is getting annoying. All right, per underdog, it is Manaea now. I don't know why that switched halfway through the day. I changed it, and now it's changed back. All right, we'll deal with that in just a second. So I guess Manaea is pitching. He did not project out all that differently from Jose Quintana. Let me just do this. Anybody who saw the original projections this morning saw it with Manaea. So anyway, as I was responding to Mamba, That's where you need to get involved, right? That's where you have to set rules and put your influence, your know-how, what have you, into working with the optimizer. Optimizers, and this is the big thing that people really get wrong about it. It's not a this is telling me what the best lineups to play are. This is telling me how I should play the slate. It's just mashing together those lineups based on the formula that they've got. So it's just going to give you dumb results that are going to largely echo what the public is doing. And if you want to get it to a different point, and with a play like that, where Cole, it makes a ton of sense that he came up in 60 some odd percent because he's going to be 30 some odd, 40 some odd percent owned on those slates. So he would naturally be in a lot of those lineups. That's where you have to get involved. If you want to say, hey, I'm going to be above the field on Garrett Cole, I think he's a tremendous play, and yada yada, then you can obviously push it further. You can leave it alone, or whatever. But where you really need to think about it is, all right, I'm going to undercut their super popular play. We've got a huge pitching slate. I want to start distributing out some of these shares. And that's where, things like just setting caps on overall pitcher exposure go. All right, I'm going to put Cole at a maximum 25%, 20% to undercut the field by 10. I'm going to put these other Flaherty and Luis Castillo and some of these other guys at a variety of different projections so that I make sure that I get my spread, take the 60 something that you're getting on Garrett Cole there, undercut the field to 20, still have a big chunk of Garrett Cole, and then you've got 40 percentage points of shares to spread out between these guys and a couple of these guys. And if you're doing that accurately, you're focusing on at least a few guys in that group who are very high-end pitchers who are going to come up under owned to the field. So you're just naturally gaining leverage by doing something like that. But the point is, no optimizer is just going to naturally do that without you putting in your influence, without you putting in randomness, utilizing the tools, utilizing the ownership caps, and so on. So that's really where the art of it comes in, rather than just pressing the make lineup now button. All right, let's find Mania in here. There he is. So this won't change much. The Marlins numbers would go up a little bit against Mania, if I remember correctly. I think they came down home run-wise against Quintana. Okay. Bada-bang. Bada-bang. All right, so Mania fits in. Oh, that's not correct. He's getting too many innings. He's not going to look that good. What is that? 5 and change. Yeah. I don't love where that lands. I'm going to have to think about that. It was lower this morning. We'll get back to that one later on. Trying to figure it out and make adjustments because B2 would have to be somebody like Griff Canning. Yeah. And that's it. That's where you get into, if you're just going with those call shares, then you're also just riding down that common path of construction where it's just, all right, him, cheap SP2s of the day, and you get 2 or 3 of those guys, and you're getting your variety of those guys, but that's all common construction. And then based on the pool of money that you'll have as a surplus after you put those two things together, that still is going to lead you to, all right, primo stack A, which is not the top 3 stacks of the day, but you're choosing between stack 4 and stack 8, and it'll default toward the highest projected ones. And then the same thing on the value end. It'll be playing between, a couple of the higher end value stairs, and you'll very, very often just be building, very hyper common lineups. And that's where I get into it when I talk about the combinations need to be different. You do not need to just go to, hey, this guy's highly owned, I can't use him. This guy's low owned, I have to use him. It's not about that at all. It's about the idea of just getting off of that common path without giving up much upside or maintaining the upside. Maybe you give up a little bit of median, but you maintain the ceiling, you exceed the ceiling, and you shave off ownership, you gain leverage against the field. So it gets into, you open up a lot of possibility and a lot of angle against your common opponent by differentiating on a key thing like your Cole shares and what they combine with. Michael Knack had a really nice open lineup, and Finau got him. Sounds like Finau didn't make the cut. I saw that Tiger didn't make the cut again. It's a lot of majors in a row now that were like 7 out of his last 8 or something like that he hasn't made the cut, I think it said. Tiger's getting up there. So Garrett Cole, one of the top options on the slate. Pretty solid projection. Very, very good price. $9,000 on DraftKings is aggressively good for Garrett Cole. $96 on FanDuel at worst is very, very playable. 5 starts, 23 and a third innings pitched. Last one was the best one. He struck out 7. He went 6 full innings. That was at Baltimore, so a very high-end opponent. Just 1 earned run on 5 hits. He walked 1. He was very good in that one. 4 earned runs in the start before that against Boston, over 4 and a third on 7 hits, a homer, 8 strikeouts, 2 walks. Not an ideal start, but the strikeouts were nice to see. Went 5 innings in the start before that, a couple 4-inning starts before that one. So we're back to stretched out Cole. There's no reason to believe that he won't find some success against a Rays team with a 25.2% strikeout rate across the projected version of the lineup. Let's see if we got the confirmed in. It does not look like we got the confirmed in yet. Really annoyed about this Mania thing. I changed that like 10 minutes before the show. I was like, I did these at 10:30 in the morning. Let me make sure that none of the pictures changed. And it changed. And then I guess it didn't change. Anyway, so no confirmed Rays lineup yet, but relatively going to be close to this one, at least on the top end, the hitters that we care about. Some of these guys could find some power success against Cole. That's always his little hiccup. He does give up some home runs. Typically, it's going to be a solo shot. He's very difficult to get on base with any consistency against. He's very high strikeout most of the time. So usually they're solo shots, 2-run homers, limited damage, but he definitely is gettable for power upside. He's a fly ball pitcher. You can see so far this year it's been super gettable. 4.85% home run rate in his tiny sample. Didn't give up a homer last time. 4 of those came in one game back against the Mets on the 25th. And then he gave up a homer to Boston in the game before last. So 3 times out, he's given up no home runs. Kind of the nature of who Garrett Cole is outside of the 4 home run blip. That's an outlier. He doesn't typically do that. 2.44% home run rate over 209 last year, but a 4.16 the year before over 202 thirds of an inning in 33 starts. So it is there. It is a thing. It's supported by some upside in the home run model for a guy like Brandon Lau, 10.33. There's no denying his power. 9 home runs and 185 plate appearances this year, a 230 ISO, making killer contact, 14.7% barrels, 42.2% hard hits. If we're looking for a cheap poke into the right field seats in Yankee Stadium, Brandon Lau fits the bill. 4,500, 3,000. Very, very playable second base option. If you're stacking Rays, he's a very high priority. If it's a non-Cole lineup and you need a cheap second baseman, you could do a lot worse than Brandon Lau, even against Garrett Cole. That said, fairly high strikeout guy, could put a 0 into your lineups pretty easily in this spot as well. John D. Diaz off the top, just 4,000 on DraftKings, still a 49.7% hard hit rate. The barrels are still down on the season. He's got 8 home runs, 273, 329, 396. The slash line doesn't look nearly as good as it was all of last year, the year before, but still a 111 WRC+, plus, still an effective run creator, still very, very low strikeout at 14.7%. Medium walk this year at 7.5%. Last year it was 10.8. He's better at that than he's been this year. So he's not the performer that he was last year, but he's not nearly priced like it. 4,290 for this version of John D. Diaz is perfectly fine. So even in this matchup in Yankee Stadium, I'm happy to take shares of Diaz if I'm going to the Rays. Randy Arozarena, 4,200, 2,800. Making a push to get traded off of this team probably. 12 home runs, 14 stolen bases on the year, just a 160 ISO and 98 WRC+. 202, 309, 362. It's been a disaster of a year for Arozarena, but he's a very, very talented multi-category contributor who any given slate upside for sure. 7.22 in the home run model. You can see a little bit of the diminishment reflected there. In years past, that would have been in the 9s, I would think, where right around where Paredes is on the next spot. So a little bit of a downturn for sure for Rosarena, but a very, very playable piece on this team if you're going there. Paredes did not get me my home run in the All-Star game. I was pissed about that. 15 home runs on the season, though. A 198 ISO, 138 WRC+. Been their best player overall. Hits the ball not crazy hard in terms of his contact profile. Just 6% barrels, 26.8% hard hits. The X stats don't necessarily agree with what he's done over the last year plus. But we're on track for last year. 31 home runs last year at 238 ISO. This year, 198 ISO, 15 home runs, over 385 plate appearances. Even if he's not quite as good as a real-life player as he might look in these fairly large samples, he's still been a pretty good DFS contributor and has the tools to continue to be a DFS contributor just based on the fact that he puts the ball in play with a lot of frequency, gets involved by drawing walks. He's on base at a very high amount, so he correlates. He's an interesting piece no matter what's going on. Josh Lowe for just 4,000, 2,600. A lot of ability, multi-category guy. 5 home runs, 8 stolen bases over just 162 plate appearances this year. Has been pretty limited in his output otherwise, but still does have pretty good contact. 13.5% barrels, 41.7% hard hits in a limited number of batted ball events is kind of interesting from a lefty in Yankee Stadium. Ben Rortvedt, briefly a Yankee as a backup catcher. He's hit 3 home runs and 200 plate appearances this year. He's a mix and match piece at the position. Jose Siri, a little bit of power upside for sure. 12 home runs on the season, 9 stolen bases. Right-handed bat, 14.9% barrels, 41% hard hits this year, but a 35.1% strikeout rate. So he comes with an extreme asterisk of strikeout danger. Could easily put zeros into your lineup. But if you are stacking Rays, he can definitely join the party. He's very cheap in the outfield. Richie Palacios for $34.25, mix and match option with multi-position. 14 stolen bases on the year is appealing. 106 WRC plus over 264 plate appearances. He's been effective. He's just kind of low output. So at best, he's a place filler for a cheap price. Taylor Walls, 27.24. Pretty limited over 88 plate appearances this year. Last year, not much better. 8 home runs, 22 steals over 349 opportunities. But right around the Mendoza line, just a 305 on base. Mix and match type. On the New York side, they're going up against Zach Eflin, who's 75 hundo on both sites. Eflin's pitching pretty well overall. You got to give it to him. I mean, he's last start was this is the 10th. I forgot the All-Star break. I was like, wait, there's a gap there. That one was against this same Yankees team. He went 7 innings, gave up 1 earned, 2 runs, 1 earned, 4 hits, struck out 6. Got the quality start, but took the loss. That's a solid enough DFS day for 7,500. The ballpark doesn't really work in his favor here in Yankee Stadium. They've got a few dangerous lefties in that lineup. It's not ideal, and he's not an extreme DFS pitcher, but for these prices, especially on DraftKings, he doesn't really need to be. A 3.99 ERA is respectable. 3.77 xFIP's a little bit better. 18.9% strikeout rate is below average, but it's not tragic. It's not one of these guys that comes in here with a 12% strikeout rate and just pitches extreme contact. Eflin can find some Ks, and there are some strikeout targets in that Yankees lineup. 6.8% barrels on a 13.8 degree average launch, just 35.4% hard hits, 88.3 miles an hour of exit velo. Limited home runs, not aggressively limited, but not aggressively bad either. His Stuff Plus is never going to really like him. Was pretty good at limiting power and premium contact last year before. A good enough pitcher to get by for these prices. That's all he is, though. He's on like the upper part of the bargain bin, but one of the more expensive items in the bargain bin at 75. I think you'd rather have Yankees bats against, even with a kind of short lineup and then a lot of dart throw type plays through the rest. They're cheap enough all around Judge and Soto that it doesn't really matter that Judge and Soto are 2 of the most expensive hitters on the entire slate. It just brings the average immediately down by just stacking them with any of their teammates. So it doesn't really matter as much. And there's enough quality to get by, and the Yanks again are at one of the more inflated totals on a pretty limited, heavy pitching slate. Ben Rice has been kind of a revelation, at least for power upside at first base over his 92 plate appearances. He's already hit 6 home runs. He's got a 266 ISO, and he's doing that with killer contact. 20% barrels, 38.3% hard hits could actually be a little bit higher, but the 20% barrel rate is fantastic. He's drawing a 12% walk rate. He's up to 22.8% strikeouts. This was a little bit better of a ratio a week or so, or back before the All-Star break, a week before the All-Star break. But he is relatively low strikeout, call it league averages strikeout and high walk, and just has a nice compact swing that fits Yankee Stadium pretty well. I like him in the leadoff spot. He can get on base, set the table for Judge and Soto, and he can deliver some power from the left side. 3,900, 3,200 at first. Makes him easy enough to play with the two premium outfielders. These guys don't really need any sales pitch. 23 home runs, 263 ISO, 179 WRC plus for Soto. And then Aaron Judge, the best hitter in baseball, 34 home runs, 373 ISO, 207 WRC plus, over 424 plate appearances. And I'll remind you that he had a completely lost April in which he had done nothing and people were worried. Alex Verdugo in the cleanup spot is playable, 3,700, 2,800. Lefties in Yankee Stadium always have a little bit of upside. Verdugo, if nothing else, is low strikeout, medium walk, so there's a lot of balls in play. Doesn't make the best contact in the world. This is not terrible contact. It's just aggressively medium. It's not super appealing, but you don't have to crush the ball to get it out to right field in Yankee Stadium. He's got that upside. He correlates well with the players immediately above him who are on-base machines, so he definitely gets some upside out of that. It's just he's kind of scuffled after a nice start. He's down to 235, 292, 378, and he's 10 points worse than average creating runs. And he's hitting cleanup for the New York Yankees. It's a weird fit. Giancarlo Stanton can't get back quickly enough. Gleyber Torres having a pretty lousy season. Another player is a player that I just expected to take another step forward this year, and he took a gigantic step backward, 2 steps backward. It's been really problematic for Gleyber in a contract year, too. He might walk, which is a shame. I was hoping he'd have another good year. We'd get him locked in, and we'd be set at second base for another few years. But it has been really ugly. Just 6.3% barrels and 34.9% hard hits. Those numbers are both down. 22.6% strikeouts is way up from 14.6 last year. We're close on walks, 9.5% down from 10% last year, but that hasn't really mattered. He's at 231, 307, 347. He's been 10 points worse than average creating runs. Just 8 home runs on the season. Lost year for Gleyber. Austin Wells is an intriguing catcher. 2,500, I think he's playable on FanDuel, but now that we've got Rice to slot in at first base, you got to go first base util. I don't love using them both. It's probably more of a one or the other situation, but it does give you 2 lefty bats that have a little bit of pop. Wells has 6 home runs in 194 plate appearances. He's pulled himself up to 216, 309, 377. Just a 162 ISO, 98 WRC plus, but makes pretty good contact. Made better contact in a small sample last year, but decent contact this year. It's a little higher than some of these guys, and he's relatively low strikeout, pretty high walk. So again, he is another guy who can get involved via correlated scoring if all else fails. Volpe's just been pretty bad, over 440 plate appearances. He hasn't hit a home run since like the end of May. 15 stolen bases, a 121 ISO, 91 WRC plus. Been pretty bad. Got demoted back down the lineup. Hasn't changed anything. Trent Grisham making aggressively good contact. 2,600 on DraftKings, 25 on FanDuel. He is not a frequent contributor. 195, 301, 389 tells you all you need to know, but 6 home runs and 134 plate appearances. Looking for a cheap left-handed home run, Trent Grisham should be in your plans if you're building a lot of Yankee stacks. He's at worst a sneaky option down here. His 4.62 in the home run model exceeds everybody not named Rice, Soto, or Judge. I think he's playable. It doesn't really make me comfortable or fill me with joy as a Yankees fan to be talking about Trent Grisham as an option, but there he is. DJ, 3,000, 2,500, another player just in a lost season. A .026 ISO, 52 WRC plus, over 135 plate appearances, 188, 284, 214. Mix and match piece at the absolute best. It's Garrett Cole way up top, followed by the Yankees bats, followed by value Zach Eflin shares, and then bringing up the rear pretty severely are the Rays bats. Steven knew what the Verdugo experience would be like. Unreleased lo-fi music. Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm pretty sure he's going to be the most highly owned over there, so you can always play cash just kind of like that. Just, I want to book off the most highly owned play. Not the biggest fan of cash games in the world in any format, most particularly in baseball. I will say you've got a really intriguing Hunter Brown that you could work with there for 500 less. I don't think that's an unreasonable pivot to make. And then if you wanted to go value and pay up for bats and go chalky bats, Coors Field, Kansas City, then maybe Spencer Schwellenbach is your guy. I've got him in my placeholder lineup right now. I didn't go that route with bats, but I got to the exact bats I wanted, and he was the perfect fit at pitcher. So I think there's value there. I think this is an intriguing high-end cash option, and then I think this is the just clear-cut go-to cash option. I don't totally trust this one, like I was saying, just given the low strikeout nature. For a cash game, I don't think you would go that way. 100 more, too, than Garrett Cole. Hopefully that helps. Speaking of that game, so Flaherty is the top projected pitcher on the board. That comes with a 32.1% strikeout rate this season, a 4.3% walk, 3.13 ERA against a 2.50 xFIP, just a 0.98 whip, generating a 14.1% swinging strike rate, 32.9% CSW. He's an extreme strike thrower. He's able to punch his way out of any trouble that he gets into, and he really doesn't get in trouble. Not yielding many base runners at all, not giving up free passes, doesn't give up much premium contact. The 3.77% home runs is honestly very high for a 7.3% barrel rate, which is fine. 11.1 degree average launch is totally in control. Just 34.3% hard hits, 88.2 miles an hour of exit velo. That just amounts to like he makes one mistake a game and people have taken advantage a few times. But very, very high-end pitcher. Even with Stuff Plus not loving the makeup, the shape of the arsenal, and everything that Stuff Plus accounts for, he is just super effective with it. The only limiting factor for me is really the Blue Jays on the other side in terms of their low strikeout nature, 18.3% strikeout rate. That is significant. It diminishes the appeal a little bit. I don't think it renders the median projection inaccurate here. I do think maybe it artificially caps the ceiling. Or not artificially, just like matchups wise. I think it caps the ceiling maybe. So like if you're looking at the pitching slate, I think it makes sense that he's up here. But I think you could make a fair argument that the group of guys like right here has a target, say here in terms of ceiling, right? And, stick with me on the visual, where Flaherty probably falls, into this one and like on the lower end of that rectangle or the upper end of that rectangle even. Just falls a little bit shorter. So it's something to bear in mind. But I think in this neighborhood is definitely in play. On the Blue Jays side, 81 for Chris Bassett on the DraftKings slate is pretty appealing against the Tigers team that has a 22.3% strikeout rate, a collective WRC plus for this projected version of the lineup of 91, which is 9 points below average, also known as not at all good. Let's see if we got the confirmed in. We do. While we're updating the lineup, hit the big thumbs up down below the screen here. Hit the little subscribe bell if you've never done that before so you know when shows are going live. Make sure you're following the @rotoscouts Twitter handle. Helps us out. And jump over to acemind.io when you get a chance and check out our sim pals over there. Sim partners, optimizer guys, whatever we're calling those guys, those nerds in their math lab. Not meth lab, math lab. Big, big difference. Those guys are great over there, though. Lowest prices in the industry for tools as powerful as what they provide. 3 free days off the top with their just trial offer. And then promo code ROTOSCOUTS all in caps gets you 20% off your first month when you decide to subscribe over there. So check them out. So the confirmed version of the Tigers lineup has a 22.3%. Nope, wait. This is not the confirmed version. This is just me grabbing the version that was in here. Let me make sure it's confirmed. Wensil, Colt Keith, Vierling, Green. This is different. Kana's in the lineup. Kelly's down here. Kinstry. So it's no Javi. Kelly, Gio, and then Randy Velotti. I don't know what Velotti's first name is. Ryan Velotti. This guy's been in the league for 3 years. How the hell do I not know who this is? Oh, because he's made 30 plate appearances in that time. All right. Ryan Velotti it is. Okay. So with the confirmed lineup in, that strikeout rate drops a little bit, but it's pretty inconsequential. You shaved like 2 points, 1.5 off of it. But it's in exchange for some pretty low-end hitters or some relatively non-threatening veterans like Mark Canha wasn't in the lineup. He's low strikeout, but he's not really a big threat anymore. 228, 334, 341. He gets on base, he correlates, but he doesn't have a lot of guys to help him do that. So he's not really a big danger. It's just a little bit limiting on the strikeout upside. When Seal, Colt Keith right around league average, 19-ish percent, a little below average. Keith's had a nice little surge. Pulled his rookie season together a little bit. Wenseal's been a decent multi-category contributor, but they're targetable enough for strikeouts at the top. A couple of 1 and 4 guys to follow. 3 through 6, you've got 3 1 and 4 strikeout targets. And then Gio Urshela, just 14.9%, but he's an out waiting to happen. I'm not really concerned about Gio Urshela, so I do think this is a spot where Chris Bassitt could have a nice day. 21.3% strikeouts over 107 and a third in 19 starts this year. 3.52 ERA, 4.24 xFIP. Respectable enough. This is within expectation for Chris Bassitt. A little bit high on the walks. Not a great swinging strike rate or CSW, but just out there doing Chris Bassitt things. Doesn't really get tattooed much for power. Every now and then he melts down for earned runs. Last time it happened, though, was all the way back at the end of April on the 26th. That was against the Dodgers. He gave up 7 earned in 2 2/3. He had a 4 earned run day on 8 hits 2 starts ago. That was against Houston. Just went 5 innings in that one. And his most recent start was at San Francisco in what looked like a fairly advantageous spot. He gave up 3 earned on 5 hits in that one. He struck out 6, but he walked 4, so he came out after 5 innings. He faced 24 hitters. Typically, we're looking at 27, 28, 29 hitters for Bassitt. He does have a lot of depth upside. He's completed the 6th numerous times this season. He's got an 8-inning start on the board, several 7-inning starts on the board. One of the better options for depth. It matters a little bit less on DraftKings because the quality start bonus doesn't exist, but 8,100 just gives you a very low price for a guy who could easily come out and go 7-8 innings against this team. 91 on FanDuel, at least it gives you a little bit of security that maybe the quality start is in play for that price for a guy who's a mid-level pitcher. So I think Bassitt's easily usable on either side. He's probably more appealing for the low price on DK. If you're going against him, Colt Keith is a very high priority bat out of this Detroit lineup. Just 3,500, 3,100 across sites. Definitely a much cheaper relative play on the DraftKings slate. He's up to 9 home runs, a 140 ISO, 98 WRC+. He's been on a little bit of a tear through the end of June into July, and was sustaining it up until the right before the All-Star break. He was the hot pickup of the week in, if you're reading different season-long pickup columns. Right after I traded him to EMAC. EMAC might have gotten me again on a high-end middle infielder. I think I mentioned it. He got Bryce Turang from me a couple years ago. I got Sandy Alcantara in that deal, and then I flipped Sandy for something else just before Sandy went pop. This time around, I got Tariq Skubal for it, so hopefully it works out for me. Skubal, Skeens, and whatever we get out of Garrett Crochet down the stretch. Hopefully that'll be enough. Mix and match pitching after that. So Colt Keith, again, high priority. Love the second base option for the very, very cheap price. lefty with a little bit of pop in that bat, relatively low strikeout, can put the ball in play. If you're stacking Tigers, he's a good starting point. Wenzel for 36.27 does have some multi-category upside. Over 298 plate appearances, he's hit 5 home runs, he's stolen 7 bases. Mediocre 314 on base, could be better for the leadoff role, but he's created runs around league average, or right at league average at 100 WRC plus. Just not a killer in terms of contact, in terms of home run upside. Not a guy who's necessarily incredibly likely to create DFS stats on his own. Matt Vierling for 4,200 is up to 12 home runs, 248, 287, 439. Not the most appealing slash line in the world. 191 ISO's respectable, 101 WRC plus. Could probably be better given the contact he's made this year. But again, another guy with just not a lot of support in the lineup. Riley Green is their best player, 13.4% barrels and 46.1% hard hits. Tells you the whole story right there. 271, 364, 503 slash line, a 232 ISO. They just need, 4 more guys exactly like this, and they'll have a little bit of a team here. But Riley Green on his own, very, very good. Just 5,000, not expensive enough on the DraftKings slate. I know that's in red in our conditional formatting there, but that's just because it's running up against a bunch of other low prices. For his talent, that's a low enough price. 3,500 on the FanDuel slate is a little bit more reflective relative to that cap. Kana, as mentioned, first base and outfield, fair price, just gets on base, a 334 on base percentage. But even with that, he's only at a 96 WRC plus. McKinstry's a mix and match infielder, 4 positions on FanDuel, but Sub Mendoza 253 on base, 61 WRC plus. Carson Kelly, not much of a catcher. He's got a little bit of pop, 7 home runs, a 45.4% hard hit, but just 6.9% barrels. A 163 ISO, but a 110 WRC plus. I guess if you're stacking Tigers and you're doing it on DraftKings, he could be your 4th, 5th man in. Gio for 31.26 is entirely skippable at the bottom of the lineup. Every now and then he can get involved. If you're building a bunch of Tiger stacks, a share or 2, maybe. And then Ryan Velati for 2,200. He's an outfielder on DraftKings. For 2,000, he's a shortstop on FanDuel. He's got a home run on the board in 23 plate appearances this year. In AAA, as a 25-year-old this year, 270 AAA plate appearances, 9 home runs, 13 steals, 286, 367, 470. You can do worse. This is a deadman shortstop on the FanDuel slate. I don't love occupying shortstop with the 9-hitter from the Tigers. But if you're bound and determined to have 4 Tigers in a bunch of different stacks, you can do worse than including him in a few for the low price. On the Blue Jays side, there's some bats that we like that we still have faith in on this lineup. There's one who's just been basically his tremendous self through most of the season. Critics be damned. That's Vladdy, obviously. 4,800 at first base on DraftKings is just way too cheap. He's slashing 288, 361, 456 for one thing. He's got a 167 ISO. All right, that's lower than it's been in his career. Last year it was just 179, though. We're not that far off the pace from last year. Year before, 205. He had 32 home runs that year. He had 26 home runs last year. In 416 plate appearances this year, he's got 14 home runs. You telling me he can't get 12 more the rest of the way? It just doesn't make sense how cheap he is. And again, as I've highlighted a number of times, he's making better contact than he has in either of those past 2 seasons. Striking out at a 16.1% rate, walking 9.9%. He is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. If you've ever played him before, you can feel confident that you're getting a discount today. George Springer for 4,200 is just cheap. 10 home runs and 9 steals and 95 WRC plus. It's a little harder to make the argument for Springer. He is barreling the ball a little bit more than he did last year, but hard hits are down. Strikeouts are down a little bit from last year. That's an improvement from last year's already good strikeout rate. Walks are up a little bit, but a lot of the results have been pretty mixed given what he's doing at the plate. It's a little bit difficult to believe in Springer, but there is some counting stat upside. There's a ton of history upside. A player is getting toward that end of the career at this point. Spencer Horwitz for 42.26 is slashing 320, 418, 485, known as an on-base machine. A little bit of pop in the bat with 4 home runs. That's unexpected output over 122 plate appearances. The 165 ISO is more accurate. He's more of a doubles hitter, get on base, but he's an extremely good on-base and correlated scoring option. 4,200, 2,600 with second base eligibility on both sites is very appealing. Obviously, having multiple first basemen on this team is not the best. Justin Turner for 34.28 across sites. Pretty skippable at this point. 99 WRC plus, a 113 ISO. Very ugly slash line, just 5 home runs, and I think at least 4 of those came before May, or before mid-May. The price is way down, but you don't want him instead of Vlad very often. Mix and match piece on FanDuel, but not an ideal third baseman. Bo Bichette for 3,900, 2,700 is just absurdly low price compared to who he's been over time, but we are not getting it at all this season. The barrels are cut in half. The hard hits are right around where they should be. Strikeouts are not mismatched from previous seasons. Neither are the walks. But 221, 274, 320, a .099 ISO, a 69 WRC plus, just 4 home runs, just 5 stolen bases. Just last year, this guy hit 306, 339, 475. Created runs 25% better than average, hit 20 home runs. Don't know where it went, Bo Bichette, but I hope it comes back someday. Lost 90 points of BABIP for one thing. 355 last year, 265 this year. 347, 339 the 2 years before that. But that was like BABIP sustained on hard hits, driven balls. Just not finding the gaps this year for whatever reason. Dalton Varsho is just a little bit of lefty base power upside, 11 home runs and 9 steals. If he happens to get on, maybe he swipes you a bag, but he's only getting on at a 285 clip. Not really appealing for that. 95 WRC plus, not great. Alejandro Kirk is a mix and match catcher at best. Ernie Clement and Kevin Kiermaier, low cost, low end options in the infield. For Clement, 3 positions on FanDuel for 25. Just third base, not ideal for 29 on DraftKings. And then Kiermaier is just a defensive outfielder. Every now and again he gets involved, but it's few and far between. Jack Flaherty, Chris Bassett. Really don't need bats from either side of this one, but it would be, I guess, Blue Jays over Tigers. But neither one's all that appealing. I think the thing I'm worried about in this one would be the Blue Jays limiting Jack Flaherty's ceiling. That would be the only really concerning thing. But it's pitching. More pitching focus for me in this one. Pods and the Guards. Diaz not in the Tampa lineup. What came out? What do we got? Richie Palacios in the leadoff spot. I won't go back, but this is it. Palacios, Paredes, Brandon Lau, Rosarena, Josh Lowe, Jose City, Rortvet, Jose Caballero, and Taylor Walls. All right. We'll go back. Just because there's a couple interesting options in there. Caballero, 24 stolen bases on the year, one of the better steals upside options, but doesn't hit for average, doesn't really get on base at an effective enough clip, 5 points lower than average creating runs. Not all that good. 6 home runs on the year, a little bit of power upside, but not really based on any kind of reliable contact or predictability. Taylor Walls in the bottom spot had 8 home runs and 22 steals in a really interesting stretch of plate appearances last year, after which he completely cratered. So there is a little bit of multi-category ability there, but it's pretty fleeting. It's difficult to actually capture. 2,700, 2,400 is more appealing where you get 3 positions on FanDuel than booking shortstop for 27 on DraftKings. I think where it gets interesting is Paredes moves up the lineup, and Josh Lowe moves up the lineup. And so does Jose City, actually. These 2 guys moving up to 5 and 6 are kind of appealing, and then Paredes in the 2 spot. Not a crazy ton of movement. Doesn't make the Rays all that much more appealing than they had been. Padres lineup is in. Looks pretty familiar. Xander Bogaerts back. If you play season long and your waiver wire is open, give it a quick look. See if Xander Bogaerts is available. Had a terrible start. Got dropped by a lot of teams when he got hurt. It's kind of reflected in the pricing. Just $4,000 on the DraftKings slate, $2,600 on the FanDuel slate. You can see it in the slash line, just 231, 274, 323, over 208 plate appearances. But this is a guy with a very significant track record of success. I do think he's worth a few flyers on season-long waivers, and I do think that if you're stacking against Tanner Bybee for whatever reason, Bogaerts is still a priority play in this lineup, even with those atrocious numbers from earlier in the year. I think it's not a great idea to stack against Bybee, though. Over 105 innings, 19 starts. He's got a 28.4% strikeout rate. So even against a team with an 18% strikeout rate collectively for the starting lineup, he can find his way, at least to a start that limits their appeal, limits their upside for DFS play as a stack. I think it at the the downside is more likely than not. Bybee limits them to 4 or fewer runs, kind of like with the Vegas total showing. He's given up 4 runs a handful of times this season. His low point was a 6-run start. He had a 6 and a 5 earned run start. It goes all the way back to his first start in May was the 6-run game. His third start of the year on April 10th was the 5-run game. Since then, he hasn't given up more than 4, but he's given up 4 times. So there have been some spots where he's not ideal for DFS, but still making pretty effective major league starts. Not necessarily booking the quality start statistically, but the last game, for example, he did give up 4 earned runs, but he went 7 innings. He faced 28 hitters. 4 earned runs on 5 hits is not terrible. He struck out 8. He walked 3, gave up a homer. In real life, that's a pretty effective start for a young pitcher. Granted, it's against Detroit. You'd like him to do better than that. But there is a little bit of downside, and I think that's what has created the perception maybe that he's less reliable. It's certainly what's lowered the price down to $8,700 on the DraftKings slate, where he gets really appealing. $97 on FanDuel, I think he is a playable option, but in a low strikeout spot, it's less appealing than the other ones. But I think he's got a little bit more of a reputation for just those DFS spots where it's like, against Detroit, he was probably appealing at price. Against the Giants, I know we talked about him that day. 4 earned runs that day, over 4 2/3. Against the Reds at Cincinnati, we might have been a little bit more hesitant. That was another one of the 4 earned run games. It's just more he's not quite gotten you over the hump DFS wise. So I think there's a little bit less faith in him. I do think, given the low strikeout on the opposing side, though, he is appreciably a little bit lower end than some of the other top pitchers on the slate. The knuckleballer on the other side, Matt Waldron, 8,600, 9,100, projects out just fine. It's just Guardians are another very low strikeout team. They're a team we don't typically target. They're a team that plays a lot of station-to-station baseball, and they're very good at it. It's really not an overly appealing spot for Waldron and what Waldron does well. So I don't really see it for 86 on DraftKings, and I definitely don't see it for 91 on FanDuel. I think he can fit into right around that median score, and maybe a lot of days will give you that median score. I don't think that's going to be enough to win you a slate at these prices today. 21.2% Ks on the season, 3.71 ERA, but a 4.34 xFIP. Doesn't really do swinging strikes or throw many called strikes. Doesn't give up a lot of power. Knuckleballers are notoriously very difficult to hit for power. But base hits, if that thing's not dancing exactly how he intends it to tonight, comes in all floaty, it's pretty easy to knock base hits on a knuckleball on the right night. So I greatly prefer the Guardian side of this matchup, and I don't think Waldron's all that appropriately priced for this slate. Starting in the leadoff spots on both sides, Luis Arraez against Steven Kwan. Series with a matchup of the 2 best contact hitters in baseball. Kwan outperforming Arraez so far this season. He's made 108 fewer plate appearances, but he's slashing 352, 407, 512 over that stretch at 164 WRC+. Arraez is down at 310, 342, 378. Still fantastic numbers, but he's been more limited, just a 107 WRC+. But tons and tons of ability, tons of base hit ability. I don't know what the hits over-under for these guys is, but it's taking the over pretty appealing in this one. Going down the Padres lineup, so getting on eyes for 4,400. I don't love that he's first base on DraftKings. I continue to prefer him at second base on the FanDuel slate. The price is great, though, for a guy who can put the ball in play 5 times and find 3 base hits out of him on any given slate, and then do a little bit of correlated scoring with some of his friends behind him in the lineup. There's a lot of appeal in getting on eyes at those prices. Jerkson Profar, Jake Cronenworth in the next 2 spots. Affordable bats, 45 and 46 on DK, 33 and 33,000 on FanDuel. 14 home runs for Profar, 13 for Cronenworth, 172 and 173 ISOs, 152 and 117 WRC plus. That on base percentage this year for Profar is what's setting him apart run creation wise. That said, I think it was over 400 for most of the season. Have we taken a little bit of a dip finally? I think I'm beyond the point where I'm rooting for the Profar dip. I kind of just want to see him close this season out with quality. Just have like one great year for his career. I think I'm more on that train now. Manny Machado for 52.31 has 13 home runs, a 155 ISO, 111 WRC plus. Still good, just not the player he once was maybe. Still making great contact, 8.1% barrels, 46.7% hard hits. The hard hit rate is up. Strikeouts are up a little bit. Walks are down a little bit. I still believe that there's a strong second half lurking in there for Manny. Whether he finds it or not, there's any given slate appeal, and definitely at those prices. Bogarts, I mentioned, 4,000, 2,600. Just ignore this year and give him a few shots at least to prove it in the comeback after returning to the lineup. Jackson Merrill is still absurdly underpriced on DraftKings. His career runs 13% better than average. He's hit 12 homers. He's stolen 10 bases over 350 plate appearances. 2,800 on FanDuel is pretty cheap. 4,200 on DraftKings, very cheap. A lot of quality from the kid this year. David Peralta, mix and match play, 27-22. He's aggressively cheap. That's about all he is. He has 1 home run in his 96 plate appearances. Bottom 2 hitters I do like. Ha-Sung Kim for 41-28 across sites, 10 home runs, 18 stolen bases. A lot of numbers that look very similar to what he's done in seasons past. We just lost a little bit on the average front, but still a very good player with a diminished price tag down there. Not the greatest spot in the lineup. I'd much rather have him hitting second, but he hasn't earned that this year. But it does make him a low-owned, cheap, interesting dart throw from the bottom. And then Kyle Higashioka, we've talked about him a bunch of times. We're just buying home run output and power upside. Has always made great contact. Has always been a sneaky, interesting power hitting catcher when he's in lineups over the last few years. We've talked about him for 3+ years now. We're up to 11 home runs over 129 plate appearances, which is 1 more than he hit in each of the past 2 seasons. After Steven Kwan, so for one, between Kwan and Arraez, there's a notable price difference. 44 versus 57 on DraftKings and 26 versus 36 on FanDuel. You are buying a little bit more power output so far this season from Steven Kwan, but it comes on very similar contact. These guys are not very different hitters. This is an odd number of home runs for Steven Kwan to have over 308 plate appearances. So 160 ISO, he's, again, excellent correlated scoring piece, one of the best table setters in baseball. But just for the price difference in a vacuum, if somebody said, hey, you have to play one of these 2 hitters and you can do whatever else you want in your lineup, I'm probably more inclined to take the discount on Arraez just between those 2 guys. Kwan's got the better supporting cast behind him, I think. Even if it's just down to like these 2 guys, Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor. Those 2 guys are better than what the Padres have to offer. Padres might have a little bit more through like the mid-range, the average end. Ramirez has 23 home runs, 18 steals, a 247 ISO, 133 WRC plus on the season. Josh Naylor, a little bit less expensive at first base, 22 homers, 246 ISO, 127 WRC plus. 2 tremendously effective bats, easy enough to get to with everybody around them cheap. On FanDuel, though, I do find a lot of times I'll go, if I go 1-2, and then I'm looking, all right, I can get cheap with one of these guys, but then I get spendy again with Steven Kwan if I want him. So it does lead sometimes in the 4-man builds to me going like, all right, I'll grab these 2, sacrifice Steven Kwan to the DFS gods, and build down lineup with some of the cheaper guys to bring that price down a little bit. Having the third, more expensive guy on a 4-man stack does make him a little bit more difficult to work with sometimes on DraftKings. But I do like the Guardians' ability to fill out your infield by and large. And then on DK, where you get the 5th position, it doesn't impact it quite as much because you can still go down board and help cheapen things up. Ana Martinez for 3,400, 2,500 hitting second for this squad. 2 home runs in 56 plate appearances, a 191 ISO. A mix and match part with an ideal spot in the lineup. So far, he's very low strikeout, high walk. It's been pretty good for them. We looked at him when he first came up. .316, .416, .537, and a 147 WRC plus over 114 plate appearances in AAA this year. Appealing from a contact, get on base, set the table, like a Stephen Kwan light almost in the 2 spot. Mix and match piece, though. If you want a little bit of a discount on your table setter and you're going to Ramirez, Naylor, and say David Fry, he's in play. Fry had that great surge out of the gate. That was a little while ago now. He's got 8 home runs and 4 stolen bases over his 246 plate appearances. A lot of that came in the beginning, but he still maintained a relatively average-ish strikeout rate at 20.3%. He's drawing 12.2% walks, still getting on at a 388 clip, creating runs 43% better than average overall for the season. A very playable part for a fair price at 46.28. Just a positional conflict with Naylor on DraftKings, which sucks. On FanDuel, you get the catcher first base, but you also get him in outfield, so you can move him around a little bit more. Andres Jimenez for 46, 3,000, 5 home runs, 15 steals, mix and match infielder with a little bit of counting stat upside. Daniel Schneemann, Will Brennan, and Bo Naylor are interchangeable parts late in the lineup. Naylor's got a little bit of cheap catcher power potential, but he really hasn't shown it, and he's shown no consistency at all this year. 31.9% strikeouts, 205, 272, 343 on the season. Just 6 home runs, just a 138 ISO. It's been a pretty disappointing year for Bo Naylor from anybody who was expecting output out of him. Schneemann has 4 home runs in 105 plate appearances, a 236 ISO. He fits into multiple positions. He's probably the most appealing guy down there. Brennan does have the 8 home runs in 234 opportunities, but it's on fairly limited contact so far. Just a 154 ISO. I think that's a little bit revealing about those home runs and like the nature of whether they're real or whether they were a little bit of happenstance, a couple well-struck balls on the right day. I think that's more the nature of those home runs given what the contact looks like, what the ISO looks like. So the Guardians are most appealing from 1 through 5. And then everybody down lineup is a little bit mixy. The fact that you don't get both of those guys on DraftKings does limit a little bit about what I was saying just before about the 5th lineup spot. I didn't realize that at the time. So it kind of does throw that back into the mix, the fact that you can't play 2 of their best guys together. This one would go Bybee, Guardians, Waldron. Bybee, Guardians, Padres, Waldron. All 4 things are playable. None of them are crazy appealing. Bybee's the most appealing thing. And at 8,700 on DraftKings, he does get more playable. Again, this is a pretty good price. Lower than the guys immediately above him with not much daylight between him and these guys. It's just you have immediately cheaper guys with, again, the same projection behind him. So not your best option, given the low strikeout opponent. Greg Biancone's here. I'm glad to be back too, buddy. It's a long week just sitting in here talking to the pets. Playing a lot of MLB The Show and doing shows for the dogs about the players in MLB The Show who might be the best DFS play on my sim. Not the same. Not the same. Don't get a lot of likes out of that one. Jake, I think Diaz was. I think I got a Yahoo alert that he was injured. It might have just been that they moved him to day to day, though. I'm not, and because they pulled him from the lineup, I'm not sure. Might be a Yahoo thing, not an actual IL thing. Michael Knack calling for the Riley Green dinger of the day. I like that pick if you're picking somebody from that team. So we're back to Sean Manaea. Ignore the projections. I'm going to have to go in there and take a look at what the innings projection and the pitch count projection are on him. I had it lower this morning, and then I had to revert it to Jose Quintana when we had that change, and now it's got to go back the other way. So forgive me on the projection here. It'll be good, but not this aggressively good. Nearly 18 DK points, nearly 35 FanDuel points is a little bit high, so forgive me for what we're seeing here. But Manaea is good enough and effective enough and has delivered results over not only this season, but through a number of seasons. To throw him against the Marlins, no big deal. 7,600 on DraftKings makes him an appealing bargain over there. 88 on FanDuel, I don't know that I necessarily run to go play that one. Part of that for me is that a lot of the time Manaea does go a little bit shorter start than some other starters out there, so you're not getting the most reliability for depth of start. That said, over his last 3, he's gone 7, 6, and 7 innings. Give up 3 earned on 5 hits over 7 against Colorado, struck out 9, give up 2 home runs, struck out 6, walked 3, no runs, just 2 hits over 6 at Pittsburgh. 7 innings against Washington at Washington, 1 earned run, 2 runs, 1 earned, 5 hits, struck out 5, walked 2. Prior to that stretch, he had not completed the 6th inning since May 13th. I think 6 is on the board. If everything's going great, 7 is there too. So, again, this will be lower. Right, like he's not going to be the second highest pitcher on the entire slate. He's going to be more in like Michael Wacha territory probably. Right, like low 30s, 15-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. So just bear that in mind, but that's going to keep him very playable. It makes him essentially the same DraftKings play as like Spencer Schwellenbach for 76 in a better matchup with a similar, maybe a little bit more high-end strikeout pitcher. So that probably makes Manaea more appealing as a bargain option than Schwellenbach on DK. But this is going to come down somewhat. 2 points here, 5 points here. Cabrera for 6,600, 7,700. Over his 28 in the third this season in 7 starts. 32.1% strikeout rate. That's the good. 11.5% walk rate. That's part of the bad. 15.3% barrels is aggressively bad. 47.2% hard hits. 6.11% home runs so far this season. An 8.26 ERA, but a sparkling 3.35 xFIP underneath it. 13.4% swinging strikes and 32.2% CSW. We're back to good with those numbers. Obviously, he's missed a lot of time. 3 1/3 innings on the 13th at Cincinnati. He gave up 7 earned runs on 6 hits. Struck out 7, walked 0, but gave up 4 home runs. That'll burn you awfully quick, and that's where some of that power number comes from. On July 7th against the White Sox, just 3 2/3 in that one. Struck out 4, walked 1, gave up a homer, 2 earned on 4 hits. That was the first start back since May, but it made some minor league starts. Through June, he went just 3-4 innings over a couple of minor league starts to stretch the arm back out a little bit. So I think your idea of if all is going really well, am I coming back out for like a 7th inning to put some upside on my start? Probably not. I find that a little bit difficult to believe. So it's a little bit capped. But he's very cheap. 6,600, 7,700 is cheap. The Mets are not the highest strikeout bunch in the world. 20% strikeout rate for this confirmed Mets lineup. That's including Jose Iglesias at 8.3%. Not that we can, necessarily fairly take him out at this point. But it is a very low strikeout guy, and there's a low strikeout Jeff McNeil there who is just a slap hitter who is not even getting lucky anymore. So kind of non-threatening, low strikeout bats. And then among the more threatening hitters, you do have Lindor down at just 16.9%. But through the power bats, that's an average 24.2% strikeout rate. So, roughly 1 in 4. For a guy with a 32.1 over his limited sample this year. Last year in 99 2/3 innings, it was 27.2. He walks the world. He is not reliable in any shape, way, shape, or form. But he's cheap. He's very, very cheap for tournaments. 5 innings for 6,600 with a handful of strikeout upside. Maybe on the right day, a win bonus to come with it on DraftKings. That's probably the limits of my expectations. Even 6 innings feels a little bit like a stretch. So he's more limited on FanDuel at 77, but that price is very, very low. If he offsets it with some strikeout upside, maybe you get there. But you're in danger with walks and so on and so forth in short starts. So not the best option in the world, but has some bent tournament discount appeal. Between the two teams, I'm really more interested in the Mets. I think that's probably pretty obvious. You'd have some pretty good power numbers showing. Last year in the larger sample, Cabrera was not bad at giving up power, just a 2.53% home run rate, sub 88 miles an hour of exit velo, a 35% hard hit rate, 2.53% home runs. Year before, as kind of a tiebreaker, it was only 71 2/3, but he gave up a little bit more power that season. I think he's a little gettable, and especially as he's rounding back into form with some good home run hitters on the other side. We're not running away with these home run model marks, so I think it's relatively close to a reflection of this spot. 10.45 for Alonso puts him over the magic number, and then you've got a couple guys hovering around it with Lindor at 9.42, followed by Vientos down here at 9.29, and then Brandon Nimmo at 8.36, and JD Martinez at 7.85. There's a lot of pop in this Mets lineup. You can see, look at how many guys in this lineup have double-digit barrel rates. Several of them significantly into double digits. Look how many of these guys are above 40%, and some of them significantly above 40% hard hits. Their top 6 is very good. They have, some production out of Jose Iglesias that will not last. They've gotten a relatively expected Harrison Bader season. Total disaster out of Jeff McNeil. If they could ever improve that spot, it'll go a long way for this lineup. But this top 6 is good. They're pricey now. Not like through the nose pricing, nobody over 4,000, nobody over 6,000. Individually, you could argue that several of these guys are still underpriced, but collectively, the price is one of the more expensive stacks. Alonso for just 51 is a guy that I would say is a little bit underpriced for the any given slate power output. 19 home runs, a 213 ISO, 119 WRC plus this season. 33 on FanDuel. Again, a little bit underpriced individually, but collectively, that adds up. JD Martinez makes fantastic contact and always has. He got 10 home runs in 278 plate appearances this year for 4,900 with first base eligibility on DraftKings. Not that you're skipping Pete Alonso all that often. You would more likely just take them both and put Martinez in the outfield, but he's got it. Outfield only for 3,300 on FanDuel makes a ton of sense to include in Met stacks. Brendan Nimmo, love the option. 12.4% barrels and 50.8% hard hits this season. 8.36 in the home run model. He's hit 16 out of the park this year. Still getting on at a 361 clip. He's stolen 8 bases. Created runs 36% better than average. Very high-end outfielder for a very fair price. Francisco Lindor is just still tremendous at shortstop. He's hit 17 home runs. He's stolen 18 bases. He's got a 201 ISO. His created runs 25% better than average. Still crushing the ball when he makes contact. Still doesn't really strike out. Still draws his walks. There is nothing not to like. If you've ever played Francisco Lindor, you can be confident that you're getting a good version of him today at a fair price. Francisco Alvarez is a tremendous catcher option. 4,400 is honestly, even with prices going up around him, that's still a pretty low price. 6.36 in the home run model. He's hit for more average, gotten on base more in his limited sample this year. 159 plate appearances. We're doing much better in those categories. We've lost a little bit of the outrageous home run power that he saw last year, but I feel like that could come back. Just, a little bit more focused in things that need to grow. I think he knows the power's there. I think there's a lot of upside in that catcher bat, and definitely not somebody to skip if you're stacking Mets. Mark Vientos for just 46 on DraftKings at third base, 3,200 on FanDuel. Again, we've talked about him before. He's got a 258 ISO over 199 plate appearances now. He's hit 12 home runs in 199 opportunities. 53% better than average for run creation in that stretch with a 291, 347, 549 slash line. 15.7% barrels, 44% hard hits. What does this guy need to do to get his price increased? That's a discount. So you do get, even with, again, the collective is more highly priced than a lot of other stacks. Those two players, Alvarez and Vientos, are discounted more significantly as individuals than their teammates are. Everybody individually is still a little bit cheaper than they otherwise could be, but I guess you just can't make everybody all that expensive on this squad. Iglesias is a mix and match piece at best in the infield. He's had a very productive 84 plate appearances, 384, 17, 582, 184 WRC plus, 3 home runs. It will not continue, but he's been fun to watch. McNeil, again, has just been completely lost. He's very cheap as a mix and match play at the absolute best, and I don't even like using him that way. And then Bader's good enough for counting stats from the bottom of the lineup. He's not a great wraparound option because he doesn't get on base reliably, but 8 home runs, 13 steals. He can get involved and he can produce, and he's not expensive. So if you're just looking to round off a stack, he's an appealing option for that. On the Marlins side, Jazz Chisholm still on the team. 4,200, 3,400 across sites. Very differently priced on DK than he is on FanDuel. FanDuel's probably got it right, considering 12 home runs and 18 steals. Maybe DraftKings has it right. 102 WRC plus, 321 on base, 158 ISO. These are highly average numbers. He is their best player, their most appealing option, but limited at best. Brian De La Cruz for 37.29 has 16 home runs, a 168 ISO, but he's 6 points below average for run creation. Jake Berger's 24 points below average. 19 for Josh Bell below average. 25 below average for Otto Lopez. Jesus Sanchez bounces back a little, just 1 point below average by run creation. He only costs 3,500, 2,900. He's actually probably their, let's say, third most appealing bat. It's probably Chisholm, De La Cruz, and then Sanchez. 11 home runs over 294 plate appearances, a 179 ISO. Makes killer contact. 12.7% barrels, 52% hard hits is great. He's pushed up to a 24.1% strikeout rate now. How high can that get? Just too much swing and miss. Too many strikeouts. He's a limited player, but the ceiling is real. If you're stacking Marlins, if you're targeting Sean Manaea, for one, it's probably not the best idea because their most appealing bats, 2 of them are left-handed. But Sanchez would be a high priority bat. And then I would probably just pick off like Jake Berger from the right side and hope for a little bit of return to form power-wise. Barrels are way down this year. Hard hits are way down. Output is way down. Just 10 home runs at 144 ISO. Bell has been terrible. Way up below 300 on base. Same thing for Otto Lopez. Further down the lineup, 61 productive plate appearances out of Xavier Edwards, but he's not a very high-end option right now. 146 WRC plus, limited in terms of his counting stats, limited in terms of DFS output, and no help around him even if he does get on base. Emmanuel Rivera and Nick Fortes are entirely skippable at the bottom of the Marlins lineup. This one goes, I guess, Manaea, believably, but again, not at those numbers. Those will come down when I update it. But Manaea, Mets bats, Cabrera, and then if you choose to throw Marlins darts, good luck. Trey, what's going on, Trey? What's going on, buddy? Sounds like Trey picked up the new NCAA football. Haven't gotten it yet, but I'm sure I will at some point. That was one that the old versions back in the day soaked up many, many hours of dynasty building. I think it's ideal, the college games, for if you like dynasty play, just because of like, in the pro ones, even with a big, say you're playing Madden and you like to build out a full dynasty squad or whatever and sim seasons and then eventually play one. Even with a big football roster, eventually you just get so many guys that are so good because it's easy enough to, manipulate trades and everything. You get first round picks and so on and so forth. If you do it right, you get a fairly loaded roster. And then it's like, all right, well, I don't have all that much maneuverability anymore because all these guys are like locked in. I don't want anybody. There's nobody better. And I've got all these guys. They're young and they're on my team for 6, 7 years or 5 years or whatever. Again, video game wise. Where college, you just have that natural shakeup with just the progression of those players through your 4-year program. So it just keeps it a little bit more fun and dynamic with the recruiting and the planning and everything. I think it's a more interesting dynasty mode. So I'm looking forward to that. My MLB The Show Dynasty mode is going well. I started it with the Marlins, and I moved them to Havana, Cuba. They're now the Havana Tiburones, the Havana Sharks. I think we're in 2037 in my sim. Finally won a World Series. Had gotten to the series a number of times, but we didn't put it away. And I think I'm going to finally play. I like to sim it out where there's no real players left and then play a season. So I think we're at that point now. But anyway, nobody's here to hear about that. And we are already at 5:04 with a lot of games to talk about. So let's get back into baseball, or back into DFS. Spencer Schwellenbach, one of the more interesting value plays on the day. 21.9% strikeout rate over 8 starts, 44 2/3. He's got a 4.43 ERA, but a better 3.86 xFIP. He hasn't really walked too many at 5.3%, generating a very appealing 12.2% swinging strike rate at 29.4% CSW. He's been good. He's been interesting and good, and he's in a decent enough matchup. 22.1% strikeout rate for the opposing Cardinals confirmed lineup. There's upside there, 7,600, 8,200. I think he fits in nicely price-wise. On that DraftKings slate, you do have Sean Manaea, who's going to be at a competitive projection in that spot against a worse Marlins team. So that's a consideration, but Schwelly will definitely be the lower owned between those two. I do think there's some appeal to this pitcher from a value sense. I think he's talented enough to give you 6 solid innings, find a few strikeouts against a up and down, okay but not great Cardinals team. In his most recent start, he went 7 innings against the Padres. He only struck out 3, but again, that's a lower strikeout team. I think he finds 2 more along the way if he goes 7 again. He gave up 3 hits, just 1 earned run. He walked 1, faced 25 hitters. Start before that, just 1 earned run on 7 hits over 6 innings against the Phillies. Struck out 6, walked 0, no home runs. 7 strikeout game, but he gave up 2 homers and amounted to 4 earned runs on 5 hits over 5 against Pittsburgh in the start before that. He's gone 6. He's completed the 6th inning 4 times, including that 7-inning game in just 8 starts. Pretty good, giving you full depth. I like the kid. Sonny Gray's just good. 3.34 ERA, a 2.76 xFIP, 30.3% strikeouts over 99 2/3 in 17 starts. We looked at it, I think, on one of the shows, or I looked at it when I was curious about it when I was putting things together. I think this is the best 17-start stretch of Sonny Gray's fairly high-end career. He's been good throughout his entire career. I think this is the best stretch we've ever had. Against a Braves team with a fairly diminished output so far this year, an aggressive enough 23.9% strikeout rate, I think Gray is very easy to play. 9,200 on DraftKings, happy to have it. 10-4 on FanDuel. I don't love the price. I think he's the highest priced pitcher on the entire slate at that price. Or second highest behind Corbin Burns. But I'll pay it. I think there's enough upside. It's not, and simultaneously, while it is a more targetable Braves team, it's also, that still makes it not the safest spot in the world. Sonny hasn't really been prone to the blow up too many times this year. A couple of 5-run games and a 6-run game, but it's about it over his 17 starts. You don't get to a 3.34 ERA and a 2.76 xFIP by pitching poorly and giving up a lot of runs. So the output's been there, the productivity's been there, and he's a talented enough strikeout option to consider him up near the top of the board, one of the higher priority pitchers of the day. I do think you can roster Braves against him. It's probably more of a spot where it's grabbing them as a very low-owned angle with just some believable power output for them. Not necessarily because he gives it up, because he doesn't give up a ton of power. Not much at all. But they are a collection of home run hitting type guys. Find the right swing, find the right elevation, the ability to get the ball off the ground a little bit better than some opponents. Maybe you hit a couple out. Maybe you find that upside day with the Braves. That said, they are relatively expensive. Again, just the collection of guys. Not one of these 3 is at a price you would say is necessarily high for who they are. Individually, they're low, but that collection of 4 guys is collectively high. Same thing over here. So it's not the best value to take that low-owned angle in against a very, very good pitcher. So it's a limited tournament play even. If you're going that route, Jared Kelenic off the top is probably a good starting point. He's cheap for one thing, 4,200, 3,100. He's hit 10 home runs. He's getting on at just a 303 clip. Needs to do better than that to maintain that leadoff spot. But he's been fairly productive up there. 9.9% barrels and 45.5% hard hits. Dead on league average for run creation. An effective enough lefty bat to start things off. Ozzie Albies, 25-36 across sites, 8 homers, 8 steals. In a down season for sure. Just a 101 WRC plus, a 152 ISO. We know that Ozzie's better than that. I like his upside for the second half. So happy to have him if I'm stacking Braves, but doesn't necessarily pull me toward the Braves. Austin Riley for 51-36. Probably appropriately priced for what we're getting from him this season. 12 home runs, a 193 ISO. He pulled things together, but had a really limited first half. It'll be interesting to see what he does second half. 30 home runs is maybe a stretch. 18 more the rest of the way. Maybe a stretch to get back to 30 for the fourth year in a row. Matty Olson, another player, just underperforming his talent, underperforming his power. Strikeouts are up 27.4 versus 23.2% last year. Walks are way down 9% versus 14.4. 176 ISO versus a 230 something I want to say from last year. Just 13 home runs over 398 opportunities. Still in there every single day. Still hitting the ball hard for just a human being, but not quite hard for Matt Olson. So the premium contact is down. He's down across the board, justifiably underpriced. Or the price, he's at a correct lower price than what he used to be. Marcell Ozuna still high priced, still delivering 303, 379, 581, creating runs 64% better than average, and he's hit 26 home runs. Everybody down lineup is cheap, and there is some quality down there. You can get any given slate home run and premium contact upside for a cheap price from Adam Duvall late in the lineup. Same thing from the left side from Eddie Rosario. More limited in terms of barrels, but more frequent hard hits from Rosario this season. They're both sub-Mendoza. They're both way limited in terms of on base, but 7 and 8 home runs in 261 and 262 plate appearances. It's a little bit of power there. Travis d'Arnaud is a more reliable power bat. 3,500 for the backup catcher, 2,900 on FanDuel. He's got 9 home runs and 208 opportunities and a 219 ISO, and he's a positive run creator, 113 WRC plus. And then Orlando Arcia is just more of a mix and match piece. The Cards are, where's their run total? And both of these teams, again, so many of these games are just falling into like all four corners are all right, but I can see everything being limited. I think the Cards are a little bit more appealing just going up against the rookie, going up against Schwellenbach here. I don't think that's all that crazy to say. You'd rather target the rookie, even with the mediocre Cards bats, than target Sonny Gray with underperforming Braves. 4,200, 2,700 feels like a pretty good price from Mason Wynn, who has created runs 9% better than average. He gets on base at a 332 clip. The only thing about Wynn is that he's a little bit limited in terms of what he does DFS-wise. 5 home runs, 9 stolen bases, 42 runs, if we're just boiling it all the way down to runs scored. He's all right, but he's almost exclusively a correlated scoring play, and he's really not even elite at that. So he's just got very good middle of the road type numbers. 284 average is great. 332 on base on its own is good. But his DFS output hasn't really aligned with like the idea that he's become a good player this year, which he most certainly has in real life. Alec Burleson for 41, 3,000 has a pretty solid season going. 340 plate appearances, 17 homers, 7 steals, a 206 ISO. He's created runs 28% better than average. Definitely part of their surge back to at least relevance. 40.4% hard hits for him on the season. He's still cheap, 4,100, 3,000. Very affordable first base and outfield. Wilson Contreras, the catcher, 4,800, 3,500, has 10 home runs, a 243 ISO. He's been mashing this season. 13.4% barrels and 47.1% hard hits. The barrel rate is second only to Nolan Gorman on the team. The hard hit rate is second only to Goldie. No, excuse me, Lars Nootbaar also down there. But point being, he hits the ball very, very hard. Great lineup spot and an appealing price for the output for a catcher. That 4,800 price tag dipping down below 5,000 on DK is really interesting. 35 on FanDuel is still correct. Goldie for 42.28, justifiably cheap now. Just a 291 on base, 10 points worse than average for run creation. 143 ISO is not good. He has hit 13 home runs. He does still make decent contact, 9.3% barrels and 48.1% hard hits. Just hasn't done much with it. Striking out 5 points more than he did last year, walking 5 points fewer. Been a lot less relevant, a lot more difficult to trust for DFS. Brendan Donovan, a mix and match piece, 8 home runs. He's got a 345 on base, 117 WRC plus. He's more of a correlated scoring option. He's hit for a little bit of power this season. He puts a lot of balls in play, and he hits them fairly hard. So I do think he's a compelling enough DFS option if you're stacking up this team. Hits in a good spot in the heart of the lineup for just 3,700. He's more appealing for 3,000 on FanDuel, where you can put him at second base, third base, or outfield, and primarily at second base. Nolan Arenado just really underperforming this entire season. I don't know if it ever comes back. 8 home runs on the season, 270, 323, 381. He is creating runs 1% better than average. He's got a 110 ISO. He's got a 3.1% hard hit rate or barrel rate and 27.6% hard hits. He is not getting the good part of the bat on the ball. He's not squaring pitches up. He's not making good contact. His swing is too long and his swing is too slow. Newpar making great contact. Solid lefty bat for 38, 3,000 across sites. 6 home runs and 3 steals in 193 opportunities. Just a 165 ISO. A little bit disappointing output-wise. 104 WRC plus. At worst, he's a mix-and-match outfielder in a mid-level type stack. Gorman's got a ton of power upside. 17 home runs, a 206 ISO. Everything else about him is mediocre and inconsistent. But he makes a lot of good contact. He only costs 39.29 across sites at second base. Michael Ciani is a mix-and-match outfielder for 2,200. He's just cheap. 10 stolen bases, but only a 263 on base, 62 WRC plus. Not that much appeal. Sonny Gray just on, the raw projection and upside, but Schwellenbach not that far behind, given the price difference especially. He makes up a lot of ground there. And then either one of these teams against opponent is playable, but not overly appealing, not a high priority stack. I would take Cardinals ahead of the Braves. Corbin Burns, Nathan Eovaldi. We'll start with Eovaldi, 2.97 ERA with a 3.42 xFIP, pitching well. 24.5% strikeout rate with a solid 13.1% swinging, a 29.3% CSW. There's really nothing not to like about the results from Eovaldi this season. Only 2 even mediocre games. Gave up 5 earned runs back on June 26th at Milwaukee, but he went 7 in that one. Struck out just 4, walked 1, 2 homers, 9 hits allowed. Mediocre, but at least he lasted and got some depth out of it. 5 earned runs also back on April 14th against Houston. Went 6 in that one, struck out just 3, another 2 home run game. Those are really the only 2 spots where he was all that gettable. Had a 4 earned run game where he came out after 3 innings against Seattle, but still managed to strike out 6, walked 4 in a weird one. That was back in mid-June. Last time out went 7. He's gone 7 4 starts in a row, including that 5-run game. Against the Padres, 3 starts back, 1 hit, no runs, 6 strikeouts, no walks, 5 strikeouts, no walks, a homer, 2 earned and 4 hits against the Rays over 7. And then at Houston in his most recent 8 hits, but only 1 run, struck out 7 over 7. I just don't love the idea of grabbing a full-priced pitcher who is kind of in the middle against a very, very good Orioles lineup. I'm more inclined to go toward Corbin Burns. On FanDuel, though, you're doing that at a much higher price. You're targeting an underperforming Ranger squad, but one that's still dangerous enough. For 200 less on DraftKings, Burns is downright appealing in that matchup. Definitely a go-to spot, given the price difference there. It's a little bit different of a play across sites, but he's definitely playable here, and that price is probably going to keep Corbin Burns a little bit less popular than he ought to be on FanDuel. I see it just kind of pushing more shares in the direction of Garrett Cole for 1, Hunter Brown for 2, and then just a mixture of these other guys. So I think Burns for the talent probably goes a little bit underappreciated. 2.43 ERA with a 3.35 xFIP. He's got just a 1.04 whip. 23.3% strikeout rate. But hey, that's, you might say, hey, that's lower than the guy on the other side who you said wasn't as good. We have a little bit more history with Mr. Burns here of, not Smithers, Mr. Burns, but a little bit higher strikeout output. I think there's some sneaky strikeout stuff still remaining for Corbin Burns. Both of these teams fairly similar in terms of strikeout expectation from the lineups. But I have a little bit more faith in the ceiling for Corbin Burnes on this side. I think it's justified a little bit by the Stuff Plus rating being 16 points above average compared to the other guy being 2 points below average. There are things in there that we can point to. He's also been very good at limiting premium contact, limiting power output. I like the option for Corbin Burnes, most particularly on DK. But again, if I'm getting an ownership discount over here, I could pay a little bit of a salary tax for that. Between the two teams, I would much rather have the Orioles, showing a couple of guys above the magic number for home run output, a couple other guys in the middle. Only Seager, Semien, and Adolis Garcia above even halfway to the magic number on the Rangers side of things against Burnes. Just a little bit more targetable here. Not that Eovaldi's been bad for allowing home runs this year, but he's allowing a fair amount of contact. 6.3% barrels is manageable, and the launch angle's terrific for limiting home runs, and he's been that guy. So it's not like he's crazy gettable, but there are years where he's made more mistakes than not, and he's been more targetable. So a little bit of that pushing through to support the Orioles side. I'm sure we've got lineups by now. Orioles are fairly consistent, at least at the top end, with what's in their lineup. And the Rangers on the other side is also in. That's another one that's relatively consistent. So Gunnar at a 12.71 in the home run model and Santander at a 10.76. I think both of those guys are very interesting hitters. Gunner's obviously extremely expensive, but he's well worth it in the leadoff spot. One of the best lineups in baseball. He's hit 28 home runs and stolen 14 bases. 373 on base keeps him involved when he's not hitting the ball out of the park. 14.1% barrels and 56.7% hard hits. He's an extra base machine. He's got a 297 ISO. His creator runs 68% better than average. If he's not the best shortstop in baseball, he's top 3. Easy enough to play, especially if you're going to Orioles stacks. And honestly, he is a reason to go to Orioles stacks. He is that good. Adley for 53.34 is affordable. 16 home runs. Really appealing where you need to play catchers for that price. Probably $200-300 too cheap. 40.1% hard hits, 8.1% barrels, just 17.3% strikeouts. So a lot of well-struck balls in play from the catcher. Creating runs 22% better than average with power. Switch hitter in the lineup every day. Love the option. Santander, another switch hitter who will be on the strong side of his platoon splits. 4,700 is too cheap on DraftKings. 34 is more correct on FanDuel, but even that is probably a little bit cheap. Santander's got an 11.2% barrel, 40.1% hard hits, which is in line with what he's done over the past few seasons. The hard hits go up and down. The barrels are relatively consistent. In 382 plate appearances, he has a 266 ISO with 24 home runs, and he costs $4,700. That's just a mistake. He hit 28 home runs in 656 opportunities last year, so we're ahead of that pace. He hit 33 home runs in 647 plate appearances the year before, so pretty sure we're ahead of that pace too. Anthony Santander, for a number of years now, has been a really effective power bat in the heart of this Orioles lineup. He is way underpriced. Honestly, he's too cheap here, but he's way underpriced here. That's super appealing. Ryan O'Hearn for 38.27 continues to be underpriced as well. It's not the same season as it was last year. In 368 last year, he slashed 289, 322, 480. In 284 chances this year, he's at 274, 335, 456. He's hit 11 home runs this year. He had 14 last year, so we've gotten some better power output. 181 ISO versus 191, though. He's created runs a little bit better this year. 6 points better than last year for run creation. A little bit more on base out of him. Still a very effective season for a guy who hits cleanup regularly in this lineup. To be that cheap at first base and outfield eligible on FanDuel, that's a bargain. Speaking of bargains, Jordan Westburg is also way, way too cheap. What are we doing? 4,800, second base and third base eligible on DK, 32 on FanDuel. This is a good price. That's a great price. 11.8% barrels and 46.8% hard hits so far this season. He's got 15 dingers on the board. He's stolen 6 bases. 224 ISO. He's created runs 29% better than average over 369 opportunities. 3 position eligible on FanDuel, 2 on DraftKings. Way too cheap. Colton Cowser is also too cheap. It's just me ranting about pricing is what this show is turning into these days. 12 home runs on the board for Kowser. 3,200 is just very affordable for a guy with a 14.5% barrel rate and 48.8% hard hits and 12 home runs and 291 opportunities. He's inconsistent, sure. He's high strikeout, sure. But the ceiling is extreme. It's a good lefty bat. Ryan Mountcastle only costs 4,100, by the way. 31 on FanDuel is closer to correct. Mountcastle's got 12 home runs and 366 chances this year. 9.4% barrels and 47.6% hard hits. For that price, happy to have it. You got to choose between him and O'Hearn on the DraftKings slate, but you can mix and match your way to that across a bunch of Orioles stacks if you're going that way. Mountcastle's career runs 14% better than average. Same number last year. 18 home runs last year. Year before, 22 home runs. A little bit lower in terms of the run creation. But there's a lot of righty pop in that bat. Cedric Mullins and Jorge Mateo are good creators of counting stats in a very infrequent and inefficient kind of a way. 9 home runs and 16 steals from Mullins. 5 home runs, 13 steals from Mateo. Neither guy close to the league average for run creation. Both guys are mediocre in terms of strikeouts and drawing walks or hitting the ball very hard at all. It's like having two of the same guy down the bottom of the lineup. You can mix and match your way through shares of those guys. You probably don't want them both in your lineup. They're exactly the same guy on FanDuel projection-wise. On the Rangers side of things, we know that Semien and Seager have not quite been Semien and Seager at the top of this lineup this season. That said, still a pretty lethal combination in the middle infield, and you get them cheap now. It's just a bad matchup against Corbin Burns. Semien 3 points below average for run creation, just a 151 ISO, 13 home runs. Definitely a down year for Marcus Semien. There's not a lot to point to that says it should be a down year, though. So it is definitely a player. Keep your eye on for the second half. I think there could be a nice surge coming from Marcus Semien. Corey Seager definitely, still maintaining tremendous contact. Not striking out that much, drawing more walks than he did last year. 270, 355, 479. 18 homers, a 210 ISO, over 358 chances. We're not far off the mark with Corey Seager. We've just gotten inexpensive around him. So that's a discount option here. Not as much here where they still got him at 38. Josh Smith, as we talked about, overperforming X stats, probably overperforming the talent. But all we're really looking to him for, and especially as long as his price stays low, is getting on base, driving in the occasional run, provided some correlated scoring from a good spot in their lineup at third base while he fills in. He's good enough to fill that role, and he has been filling that role over 339. In the next 339 plate appearances, does he replicate this? Probably not, and most specifically not in the home run department. But a reasonably good average, a good strong on base percentage, and a well above average run creation mark, I think is definitely still in the cards, even if we do get some diminishment around the hit tool and around the power. Wyatt Langford for 42, 3,000 has a lot of upside. 5 home runs, 8 steals in a mediocre first half of his rookie season, but a lot of talent, a lot of upside to go. Adolis Garcia, tremendous premium contact. 17 home runs, 7 stolen bases, 194 ISO. Everything else is kind of sucked around the edges, but still a tremendous option for DFS. 3,200 is cheap. 4,600 is even cheaper. Nathaniel Lowe for 35.29, 6 home runs, 348 on base, creating runs 6% better than average. Excellent option for correlated scoring, putting the ball in play. Can hit the occasional home run, hit 27 homers 2 years ago. Lefty bat with a little bit of pop. He's got 6 in just 302 opportunities this year. He's not a tremendous power bat, but there's a little bit more power than what he's showing right now. And again, just a very good correlated scoring piece. Jonah Heim, Travis Jankowski, and Leody Taveras at the bottom of the lineup, all mix and match plays positionally. Heim can hit you the occasional dinger. Taveras can too. He can also steal you a base from time to time, but he's got a sub 300 on base. All 3 of those guys sub 300 on base. All 3 of those guys below league average for run creation. Not a lot of appeal in the last 3 spots, but kind of a lot through the top 6. It's just an atrocious matchup. Corbin Burns. I'm going to go Orioles bats above Nathan Eovaldi, but I think Nathan Eovaldi is highly playable. So I'm going Burns, Orioles bats, Eovaldi right there with them, and then a big step down to the Rangers bats. I want to skip this game, but we can't. White Sox and the Royals, we've got both lineups in. Apparently Nick Senzel is on the White Sox now. Adam Frazier back in the leadoff spot for KC. I love how, and I talked about this the other day before the break, I love how they changed that decision I was ranting about all season. Move Garcia out of there. And the guy they moved into the leadoff spot has a 292 on base. Not that they've got a lot to choose from, but there's probably a better way to go. Brooks Baldwin also in the lineup for the Chi Sox. Apologies if they've added Nick Senzel or Brooks Baldwin to the slate. Doesn't look like they were on either site to start the day. So in addition to just being completely terrible, the White Sox are now a 7-man lineup for stacking purposes. Just kind of limits an already really, really limited spot. If you're looking at White Sox against Michael Wacha, who is a gettable enough pitcher, he's got a 3.83 ERA, a 4.13 xFIP, just a 20.9% strikeout rate over 89 and a third. That said, doesn't give up a lot of hard hits, doesn't give up a lot of exit velo or launch, a few barrels, but not too many, and pretty respectable home run rate. He's just a league average, okay kind of a pitcher, but I think he's good enough to tear through this White Sox lineup. I think he's good enough to be playable at 82 on DraftKings. Maybe a few probably pretty bad mid-range darts. This is a little bit of a high price on FanDuel. Projects out just fine and probably has a little ceiling on it, but I don't love this. It's a little bit better over there. But I think what I'm getting at is that the White Sox are not an appealing stack. Even though Wacha is, among all the pitchers in baseball, he probably leans at least in like the middle of the board and probably leans toward the more gettable side. If you're going that route, Luis Robert is your top option at 5,200, 3,500. He's got 11 homers and 11 steals in just 179 plate appearances, 255 ISO with a 121 WRC plus. He's one of two players in this lineup with an above average WRC plus on the season. The other's Tommy Pham at 103. Pham in the leadoff spot is probably your third priority bat behind Eloy Jimenez, who's hitting fifth. Jimenez at 4,200, 2,700 for his ceiling is very affordable. That said, we haven't really seen the ceiling all that much this year. 214 plate appearances of mediocrity, 81 WRC plus, a 112 ISO, 5 home runs, 3 steals. That's pretty bad, even for accounting for the fact that he goes in and out of the lineup with injuries all the time. Gets hurt if he sneezes. Pham for 44.28 is decidedly average. 4 home runs, 5 steals. Can give you some counting stats, can get on base, provide correlated scoring, but with what? Andrew Benintendi for 29.24 is just bad. 201, 258, 311 from a guy who's supposed to hit for contact and get on base. He's got 7 home runs on the board, and we're very proud of him. Andrew Vaughn for 36.28 has 11 homers, a 154 ISO, and 92 WRC plus. He's making decent contact this year, but that's about it. He's not really getting all that much for it. Had a little bit of a power surge before the end of the first half, but very, very limited option at first base. Senzel not available as far as I know. Brooks Baldwin not available as far as I know. Paul DeJong and Corey Lee are mix and match parts. DeJong has hit 16 home runs, but everything else around that has not been good, has not been consistent. 31.6% strikeouts. The contact is great. The home runs are fine. To good, to great, whatever you want to call it. But nothing else is real here. Nothing else is overly appealing. He's your 4th highest priority bat in this lineup if you're going to the White Sox. But he is not a reason to go to the White Sox. The Royals have the 2nd highest total on the slate. 5.45 when we started the show. They're drawing down against Chris Flexen today. That's part of why. Flexen continues to have a hilarious worst in baseball stuff plus rating, or at least worst among pitchers that we ever talk about. 51.34 on a scale where 100 is league average. Ouch. 4.82 ERA with a 4.98 xFIP, a 17.1% strikeout rate, just 8.7% walks. Doesn't induce swinging, doesn't throw too many strikes overall. Not terrible for premium contact, but even with that, it still results in home runs against. Just bad is maybe strong, but well below average. He's bad. Chris Flexen's just bad. Royals bats all the way. In the top spot, Adam Frazier, 3,000, 2,500. They're going to get really popular. Adam Frazier is a skippable piece outside of being appealing in that leadoff spot for the cheap price with some multi-position on him. The one spot I would consider him is second base on FanDuel. I feel like he's just another outfielder, even at those cheap prices, even in that lineup spot. He's playable in stacks, but I think the popularity of the stack is going to render Adam Frazier, for his talent level, probably pretty overowned. So I think you can pivot around that. Bobby Witt is obviously a tremendous starting point. He's neck and neck with Gunnar Henderson for that top shortstop title. 16 homers, 22 steals, a 235 ISO, 152 WRC plus. Makes tremendous contact, doesn't really strike out, doesn't draw too many walks. You could say from one hand that could improve and pushes on base even higher and he'd be more involved for run creation. But with that low walk rate adjacent to the low strikeout rate, just a ton of really well hit balls in play. I'll take it like that. Vinny Pasquantino, 45.5% hard hits. Speaking of well-struck balls in play, 13.3% strikeouts. Everything gets put in play with this guy. He also draws walks at an okay clip at 8.3%. Last year it was 11.9% strikeouts and 9.6% walks. He's getting on base at just a 310 clip. That does need to improve, but as I've said many times this season, as long as he keeps doing all this, everything here will continue to climb. And he's shown that in spurts this season. 4,700, 3,100, a lot of appeal for the lefty first baseman. Sal Perez, 4,600, 3,500, pretty manageable price tags for a catcher with 17 home runs, a 195 ISO, a 124 WRC plus, 9.31 in the home run model on the second highest implied total team of the day. Sal's going to get popular today, but maybe not as popular as he probably should be, given how cheap he actually is. FanDuel's got it right at 35. DraftKings, way cheap, and you have to play catchers here. That's just silly. Hunter Renfroe for 34, 3,000 is like a mix and match part at this point. 8 home runs on the season for him. You've also got 8 home runs in 100 fewer plate appearances from Michael Massey with a better slash line, better ISO, better WRC plus. Give me Massey at second base in that pairing all day long. 34 versus 4,200. I'll pay the difference on DraftKings. Just a $100 price difference on FanDuel. Happy to have it. Freddie Fermin for 31.26, a backup catcher with a little bit of quality. 291, 344, 411 over the 192 plate appearances this season. Pretty good at getting on base. Decent average. Ability to put the ball in play. Relatively low strikeout. Fits right in with what this team is looking for out of their hitters. Quality bat who honestly could hit higher in the lineup if Perez wasn't playing today. You could move Freddie Fermin up the lineup. What would be really interesting on days where Furman's in the lineup would be to put him in the leadoff spot. I know he's not really your traditional leadoff hitter, but he had a 321 on base with a 281 average over 235 plate appearances. Last year he created runs 8% better than average. And then this year in a not huge sample, but a respectable enough sample size, getting on base way better than that and better than everybody else on this team not named Bobby Witt. So if you don't want Witt in the leadoff spot, on the days where Furman steps into the lineup, you could do worse. I don't care that he's not fast. I just want the runner on first base. Michael Garcia down in the 8th spot now. As I've said, I do think, eventually on talent, he should settle in 5 or 6, somewhere in that neighborhood. 6 home runs, 21 steals, 230, 282, 344, 27% worse than average for run creation. Still does make good contact. Still an appealing kid. 16.3% strikeouts against a 42% hard hit rate. Just needs to pull things together and deliver the complete package. But very talented guy. Second base is very appealing for the skill set. So especially less pressure hitting down lineup, maybe we get a nice little bounce in the second half. Kyle Isbell, entirely skippable. And if it wasn't obvious, don't play Chris Flexen. Royals bats way up top. Waka just an awkwardly priced. If you want him, he's there for a value against one of the worst teams in baseball. It is a very good matchup-based spot for Waka. But even with that, he's here. It's more appealing where you got to go 2 on DraftKings, obviously. And again, Shomanai is going to be down in this territory. Nothing from the White Sox. Coors Field. Line them up. Knock them out of the park. Like I said at the top, the Giants with the monster run total just kind of had to be pushed to the top of the board for the Coors Field game here. But if you actually math out the average, I think they were 4th. Still a very, very good option. But when we're just looking at the raw DFS projection output, they do get cut into a little bit down the bottom of the lineup by some pretty low projections. And then like Patty Bailey is just, average projection-wise in the middle. So a couple of teams were out projecting them, but I think on opportunity, on Vegas, the 5.66, the nature of Coors Field, and everything they've got going for them there, I do think it was justifiable to give them a little bit of a nudge to the top of the stacks board. As we always talk about, the Rockies, when they're in home games, just tend to go a little bit under-owned by comparison to their opponents while still benefiting from everything Coors Field. They're facing the more interesting of the two pitchers. I don't really see a need to go to Cal Quantrill. You could make the argument that you could get some depth on the right day against a Giants team that has been gettable, that has a 23.7% strikeout rate this season. Quantrill had a few good starts in a row in the middle of, let's say, like mid-May to mid-May. He had a good May. June was not as good, but there's a couple okay starts in there. And then he's kind of hit the skids over the past, 5 starts or so. None of them have been a total meltdown, but he's given up 5 earned runs twice in that stretch of 5 starts. 3 earned runs 2 other times, and then 2 earned runs. So while not completely imploding, they haven't been great. One of them was at Cincinnati. 3 of them rather, were home starts. One of them was at the White Sox. That's pretty unforgivable. 5 earned runs to that team. 7 hits. He gave up 3 home runs to the White Sox. Jeez. Did strike out 8. Doubled as a tie for his season high in strikeouts. There's a infinitesimally small opportunity for Cal Quantrill to succeed for 6,000 as a tournament play. It's only there if you're building 150 lineups, and it's really toward the back end of those shares. It's very low end. The guy's got an 18% strikeout rate against a 9% walk rate. He's given up 3.23% home runs despite just a 9.8 degree average launch. It's one of the things I was going to point out is that he does sometimes tend to limit power and limit premium contact and home run upside. But it comes with a lack of strikeouts. It comes with a pretty high walk rate. He's never been good, but he can eat some innings on the right day. You find a couple of Ks along the way, and maybe you get away with limiting some runs. Odds are the Giants get to him. Doesn't seem like a great option. Like I was saying, Harrison on talent is the better of these two pitchers. The results don't necessarily bear that out this year. He's not all that much different results-wise than what Cal Quantrill's been. 19.8% strikeouts, a 4.08 ERA with a 4.40 xFIP. Has given up some hard hits, some exit velo, ton of barrels on a fly ball trajectory. Has actually gotten pretty lucky to have that just be at 2.71%. 10 points below average by Stuff Plus, too. This is a kid who, all along over the past few years as he was coming up through the minors, all the hype was one of the best left-handed pitching prospects, if not the best left-handed pitching prospect in baseball. And hasn't totally delivered on that. Was okay down the stretch last year and is better than a cup of coffee. What was it? A bowl of soup? A carafe of coffee? 34 2/3, made 7 starts last year, 23.8% strikeouts, 4.15 ERA, but a 5.02 xFIP. Really hasn't been the pitcher that was promised. Has a long, long time to work that out and deliver on that, but right now, don't see a ton of appeal, don't see a ton of reason to go to him in Coors Field, and I can see him pushing some upside toward those Rockies. I really, really could. For one thing, you've got Talia down the lineup with an 11.61 in the home run model. He's hit 16 home runs for those not paying attention in just 192 plate appearances since they called him up. He had been mashing in the minor leagues before the call-up. He's got an 18.1% barrel with 53.4% hard hits. He hits down lineup at the bottom of one of the most atrocious lineups in all of baseball, so it's easy to miss him. It's also easy to, be completely relegated to a 0 by him because he strikes out 31.3% of the time. He's sub Mendoza at 197. He's got a way under 300 on base at 260. You're just buying home run upside and power upside. He's got a 306 ISO to go with that excellent contact and that killer home run total. You've got similar talent in Hunter Goodman as far as very high-end power, a lot of very good contact. His results haven't been quite as dramatic as Talia at the major league level yet, but he has 7 home runs and a 222 ISO over his 134 plate appearances. 11.2% barrels and 41.6% hard hits. He's another guy who could easily give you zeros. You might pile up just 8 plate appearances of zeros from those players. 29.1% strikeouts from Hunter Goodman down the bottom of the lineup. But a lot of power. A lot of it coming from the right side of the plate. Hunter Goodman also has catcher eligibility on DraftKings, which is kind of important over there for 41. That said, you've got Elias Diaz in the cleanup spot for just 4,200, which continues to be appealing just on an any given slate basis. Just if I'm making a lineup by hand, I've got every position filled out except for catcher, and I've got, let's say, 4,800 left on DraftKings. And I'm just in a scramble because we're ticking down. There's 10 seconds left before lock, and I've just got to open up catcher and just go to a guy. Elias Diaz would be high up that list of guys that are just going to be in my head because I know that he's hitting cleanup on almost every day. It's a bad lineup, sure, but he is a good hitter. 286, 330, 403. 90 WRC plus, not good. 117 ISO, not good. 5 home runs in 267 plate appearances, mediocre. The contact is mediocre, but he makes a lot of it. He strikes out 18% of the time, walks just 5.2. Give me a catcher for that price who puts the ball in play that frequently and can get on and provide, well, in theory, could provide some correlated scoring. Keeps him afloat when he's in that kind of a spot in the lineup. Brenton Doyle in the heart of the lineup is just a tremendous player. I know I'm bouncing around the Rockies lineup a little bit, but who cares? He's got 15 home runs and 20 stolen bases. He'll be popular. He's no secret at this point. But he's very, very good for counting stats. He's making killer contact. 112 WRC plus, one of 2 guys in this lineup above average for run creation. The other one's Ryan McMahon with his 109. He's definitely cooled off after that monster start that he had, but that's just kind of rendered him cheap. And his cool off is just going back to, kind of previous versions of Ryan McMahon, which is still a very playable part in Coors Field. 49-29 across sites in a season in which he's still maintained a 12.4% barrel, 53.4% hard hits. Very solid slash line. He's created runs above average. It's a strong option. Tovar, 14 homers, 188 ISO, down to a 96 WRC plus, just getting on base at a 302 clip. Could definitely stand to improve those things. But just 4,500, 3,000 if you're stacking Rockies, he makes sense at shortstop. If I'm going to the Rockies, it's partly because they're cheap. So I don't know that I would necessarily say like, all right, I want Tovar at short and block myself off from the Bobby Witts of the world, because a natural partner stack in this alongside this Rockies team would be that Royals team. As we talked about at the top of the show, though, in terms of like commonality of public build, that's going to be a really common combination. So you always want to consider that. And that's just as we get into like individual position by position. I always like to think, all right, so if we're talking about Rockies and we're talking about their shortstop, what are we likely combining this team with? Do we want to eat that shortstop spot up? That's why I'm always saying, he fits in there, but I'd really rather have him at second base. I'd really rather have him here. It's not necessarily because of like, traditionally I want power at the corners and speed in the middle infield, and I'll sacrifice power for middle infielders who can play quality defense and traditional baseball thing. It's more just like, what are the positional blockers, because there are those guys and those types at those positions across other teams. So it's like the likelihood of what I want to put this team together with, combined with who's available at what positions on that team. Does Tovar make sense? So it really depends on which lens you look through at Ezequiel Tovar. Charlie Blackmon is very much the same thing in the outfield. You just get 3 bites at the apple in the outfield. Charlie's getting on at a 330 clip, but he's only creating runs 4% worse than average. He's got 6 home runs and 5 steals. Pretty mediocre at this point, but he's a playable mix and match type outfielder. Down lineup 6 spot, Brendan Rodgers for a fair price at second base. He's been involved a little bit this year. Just a 78 WRC plus doesn't really align with an okay slash line. 6 home runs, 44.6% hard hits is the most appealing thing he's doing. There is upside there. There is potential for an okay second half and a higher end second half than we've gotten from him, especially if there's a rising tide effect from just having good bats around him. We'll see what happens, but I think he's a playable second base option. And then Sean Bouchard in the middle of the bottom third here, 3,400, 2,400. He's also sub Mendoza. He's also sub 300 in terms of the on base. He's only got 1 home run in his 106 opportunities this year. Last year, he hit 4 in 43 chances. while slashing 316, 372, 684. And then the year before, he hit 3 and 97 chances while slashing 297, 454, 500. So I wouldn't completely write Sean Bouchard off as a cheap option down lineup if I'm stacking up a bunch of these guys down there. He's in the mix. And then the Giants bats, the team that everybody will be going to in this spot because they've got a monster total. Jorge Soler continues to be an interesting bat in the leadoff spot. Just give a hitter like that all those opportunities in terms of plate appearances, and you got to figure at some point the talent will win out and he'll start hitting home runs again. We've got 10 on the board this season, just a 172 ISO. The contact is greatly diminished, but this is gradually climbing. The barrels are coming back a little bit. It would be nice to have him in the 10-12 range at the very least by the end of the season. There's still monster upside there, and Coors Field effect very much in play with Soler. He'll be popular. Lamont Wade, you guys know I love the bat at this point. Maybe he slips under the radar a little bit. Probably not because he's so cheap in Coors Field, $4,500, $2,600. Unjustifiably cheap, I would say, for a Coors game. But if there's any possibility of getting him low owned, he immediately becomes probably my favorite bat on this team. Over 210 this year. He's at 311, 438, 419. He's got just a 108 ISO and 3 home runs, but he's created runs 51% better than average. Last year, he finished up at 256, 373, 417, created runs 22% better than average, hit 17 home runs from the left side in 519 opportunities. He is a very, very strong correlated scoring option with some power upside from the left side. And for a large chunk of last year, he was holding up better numbers. He must have had a really weak finish. I forget exactly what happened, but for a large chunk of last year, this was over 400, and the numbers were even better looking overall. But that is not a bad finish for a player that really isn't all that popular, really isn't, outside of Coors Field Day where he's this cheap hitting second, really doesn't get the ownership attention that his numbers probably deserve. Elliot Ramos for 52.34 will certainly get a lot of attention today, and deservedly so given his numbers. 226 ISO with 14 home runs over his 263 chances this year. 15.8% barrels, 50.3% hard hits. Kid's been absolutely fantastic for this team. Justifiably the highest priced player on either site. But with that in mind, that's not a high price for that talent in this ballpark. Patty Bailey, another very, very appealing catcher. 4,700, 2,800 across sites. 283, 354, 430. He'll just be more popular than Elias Diaz on the other side, and they give you relatively similar things. Bailey's getting on base a little bit more. He's creating runs in a positive sense versus a negative. Mediocre power out of both guys, but Bailey's probably got a little bit more of it. Either way, I think you can grab an easy one-off catcher out of either one of those guys. You're just dealing with the popularity and a little bit higher of a price on Bailey. Conforto and Chapman have a bunch of power from the left side and the right side, respectively. Conforto's got a 201 ISO, and he's created runs 12% better than average over 277 chances this year, making very good contact, 46.5% hard hits. That compares favorably with Matt Chapman's 45.6% hard hits. Chapman's got 13 homers, but just a 176 ISO. When he's not homering, the results are mixed, but he's got a ton of righty power in that bat still. 109 WRC plus for the season, having himself a good little year. He's stolen 9 bases randomly. That's got to be a career high, right? That is more than double his career high. His previous career high was 4. He did that last year. So that's a little weird. Not the first time we're noticing that Matt Chapman is running a little bit this year, but it adds to his appeal DFS-wise just, slightly. It's not a common occurrence, but it's there. Yaz for 4,000, 2,400 across sites, 8 home runs, a 195 ISO, 114 WRC plus. The ability to hit the ball pretty hard from the left side is appealing against this pitcher in Coors Field. As you get further down the lineup, you tend to get lower ownership, and Yaz is very, very cheap for his talent. So definitely a bat to keep in mind. He might be the more popular out of the lower popularity guys on this team, if you get me. But definitely appealing and is not going to be as highly owned as, say, Conforto, 2 spots higher in the lineup. Tyler Estrada for 43.26. 9 home runs on the season, just a 136 ISO and a 72 WRC plus in a disappointing year, but has had some pretty good seasons for counting stats in years past. Last year, 14 homers, 23 steals, created runs 1% better than average, 271, 315, 416. He's a capable enough contributor, and again, Coors Field. Brett Wisely from the last spot, 43.25, mix and match player. A little bit of ballpark benefit can definitely be played in the infield. 2 positions on DK, 3 positions on FanDuel. Bats on both sides. Giants ahead of the Rockies, but Rockies closer than you'd think. And if ownership makes a difference and cost makes a difference, they pull even. Neither pitcher is on the board for me. Jacob Wilson is supposed to make his A's debut. He is in the lineup, hitting 8th. He's, by all accounts, Wilson is one of these prospects who rates out pretty well on prospect rankings, but it's important to keep in mind in a lot of cases, especially if you're looking at like MLB.com's prospect rankings, those are not fantasy focused. So there's a lot of guys that slip through on really good defender with some speed, quick hands, can maybe hit for average, and that offsets any lack of power and so on and so forth. And Wilson seems to be, kind of in that range. He's not on the slate anyway, but just, to throw it into the mix and to talk about what kind of a hitter we're getting there. They might have added him. If they added him, apologies. He's this Jacob Wilson. Yeah, there he is. 4 home runs in 90 plate appearances in AAA this year, and 3 home runs in 93 in AA. So that's 7 in 183 plate appearances. That's pretty good power output. 250 ISO, 241 ISO across those 2 stops. Was absolutely raking in the minors this year. Prior to that, he had made at the development level and in high A in 2023. He made 111 plate appearances and hit 1 home run. Stole 4 bases. But seems like a good stick anyway. I mentioned wanting to target Griff Canning, and I do. I think he's probably not a good option. 5,800 on DraftKings we have to talk about. But I don't love it. I'd rather just have some A's bats on the other side of it. He did beat this A's team pretty handily the last time out. Or the last time he faced them. That was, again, 4 starts back for him. He went 7 innings. He gave up just 1 run on 5 hits. Did give up a homer, but didn't get destroyed. 5 strikeouts, 1 walk. If you get that start for 5,800, obviously it's in play. Obviously it's in play. For 68 on FanDuel, do you get to the quality start all that frequently if you roll this 100 times? Probably not. It's a lot more limiting on FanDuel, I think. Overall, this is a pitcher with a 4.84 ERA, a 4.88 xFIP. 15.7% strikeouts, giving up a monster amount of power, 41.3% hard hits, 90.4 miles an hour of exit velo, 4.04% home run rate. He has not avoided the long ball since start on June 7th. That's 6 starts in a row in which he's given up at least 1 home run. In 4 of those starts, he gave up 4 earned runs. He's avoided the total disaster. But he's very gettable for home run power. That feeds upside. That feeds DFS. Maybe it's a short stack of A's. Maybe it's a 4-man for a discount on FanDuel. 2 guys above the magic number for home run upside in Brent Rooker and Shea Langoliers. Rooker's got 21 on the season. His best year, 281 ISO, 166 WRC+. It's been absolutely mashing. Probably will decline in terms of the averagely on base as the second half continues. But the power's very real and going to stay completely there. So Rooker's a good option. Langoliers is already just a power bat. 17 home runs in 313 plate appearances, 223 ISO. Everything else is just terrible, and you can ignore it. Zach Geloff has 12 home runs and 11 stolen bases now, over 308 plate appearances. The triple slash is bad, but we're not far off the mark from where we were last year in terms of the counting stat output. Similar sample, 8 more plate appearances. He's just not hit anywhere near that average or that on base or slug. We've lost a lot of ISO. We've lost a lot of run creation so far. But the counting stats are there, and he's very, very cheap at second base, 3,700 and 3,000 across sites. As far as A's bats go, he's appealing. I like this little 3-man here in the heart of the lineup with Rooker and Langoliers and Zach Geloff. I think you can get a lot out of that. And then you've got some decent mix and match parts, including today's home run pick of the day, Lawrence Butler from the top of the lineup. Butler's got 9 home runs and 6 stolen bases on the season in 193 plate appearances. He's a lefty, and lefties absolutely obliterate Griff Canning. 194 ISO for him on the year, and honestly has underperformed. 29.5% strikeout rate is aggressively high, but an 11.8% barrel, 48.7% hard hit. I like the upside going forward. I really do. 9.14 in the home run model. I wanted an A not named Rooker or Langoliers for that home run pick, so I took him. Great spot in the leadoff role as well. Miguel Andujar for 38.27. Slashing 281, 306, 382. It's probably not sustainable over time. He's more of a power bat, historically speaking. But he's been low strikeout, low walk. Not great contact so far. But he's been getting it done at least effectively enough to hold down that 2 spot in this lineup for a cheap price. It's a mix and match piece in the 2nd spot. JJ Bleday for 37.29 has 11 home runs, a 190 ISO, a 111 WRC+. Plus. Been one of the A's better players. It's not saying a lot overall, but for this lineup, if you're stacking it, he's an important bat. Seth Brown, further down the lineup for 26.25, has 7 home runs and 4 steals in 209 plate appearances. Everything else is pretty bad around the edges. Just a 77 WRC+, plus, just a 145 ISO. 9.7% barrels is all right. It's down significantly from 12.2 last year. What's really down is the 34.7% hard hits, as down from 46.1 last year, 40.8 with a great barrel rate the year before. The reason to talk about Brown, last year in 378, he had a 184 ISO, which is just okay, 14 homers. The year before, in 555 chances, he had 25 homers, stole 11 bases, had a 214 ISO, 116 WRC+. Plus. Interesting enough, lefty bat. Again, lefties murder Griff Canning. Don't sleep on Seth Brown late in the A's lineup here. Wilson, so far as I know, not on either slate. Mix and match piece if he is. Max Schumann is pretty much a mix and match piece. 5 homers, 9 steals. Decent on base percentage. I guess you can consider him a wraparound share if you want him. 3 positions on FanDuel, including second base, is more appealing than shortstop on DraftKings. The Angels up against J.P. Sears, who has a 4.56 ERA with a 5.01 xFIP, just 17.6% strikeouts. He's very cheap. I said we would talk about him. One appreciable difference between him and Griff Canning, outside of a lefty and a righty, is a significantly higher stuff plus mark. We're still less than a point below average overall for Sears across the full arsenal, but that's a significantly higher rating than his opponent has. He's been a little bit better in terms of allowing home runs, but it's not all that different in terms of contact. He's given up more barrels, and he's actually more of a fly ball pitcher. Slightly better for strikeouts this year, but I don't think he was as good. Yeah, not as good last year. Both pitchers are probably going to get nailed today. I think even with the slightly higher price, Sears is the more interesting of the two. It pains me to say that, but I just think you could probably skip both pitchers even for the value. You do have a 23.2% strikeout rate in the opposing projected Angels lineup. I don't think we have the confirmed one yet. We don't. If you're going that route on the Angels side of things, Anthony Rendon is hilariously still the minimum price on FanDuel. I think they're waiting until he shows any signs of caring at all about playing professional baseball anymore. 35 on DK feels too expensive. He's just been bad. 33.28 for Nolan Schanuel. He's got 8 home runs, but everything else has been pretty mediocre at best. Low strikeout, an okay walk rate, but not really doing a lot with it. Pretty tough play for DFS purposes. Taylor Ward has 14.1% barrel rate and 44% hard hits. He's hit 14 homers. That is mixed in with Logan O'Hoppe, who has 14 over 315 chances. Zach Neto, who has 12 with 14 stolen bases to boot and has probably been their most interesting DFS player, over 345. And then Joe Adell, who has 15 homers and 10 steals, but a 190, 255, 399 from the bottom of the lineup. There's some mix and match power there. You can get a good DFS day out of any one of these guys. It's just how frequently you're getting a good DFS day out of 4 of those guys, or even 3 of them. It's not very consistent. 4,200, 2,900 for a player of Ward's caliber is not a bad price, but he's been right at league average for run creation. The ISO is unimpressive. The output's been all right, but probably should be better given the contact that he makes. Kevin Pillar is just a replacement level outfielder. 7 home runs, 7 steals. Very nice. 4,100, 2,900 for O'Hoppe's power is appealing. 14 homers, a 197 ISO for those prices where you have to play catchers especially. Definitely one to keep in mind. Brandon Drury, for a cheap price, you're just dealing with history over the last 2 years of Brandon Drury being a power hitter. He hasn't done anything to speak of this year. Kistinger is interesting if he's in the lineup just because he cost $2,300, $2,000. In 22 plate appearances, hasn't done anything in the show this year, but was once upon a time a very high-end hitting prospect. delivered in spurts, but never consistently, and now finds himself on this weird land of unwanted toys. What was the name of that? I didn't quite get there. It's from, what was it, the Rudolph Christmas special? What am I trying to conjure? The island of unwanted toys, the island of misshapen toys, whatever the hell it is. We're not going to spend the end of the show trying to figure that out. But that's what this team is almost entirely comprised of at this point, is a bunch of never-was type guys that are former high-end prospects. Here it fits right into that mix with Adele and some others. A's bats. Enough said. It's really like A's bats, Angels bats, and then if you had to rank the pitchers, it would be J.P. Sears over Griff Canning, but neither of the pitchers is overly appealing. The A's bats are more appealing than the Angels, but the Angels are playable. They're also cheap. They're also facing a very gettable pitcher. The lowest run total on the slate is 7 runs in this game, which is very even up on the Vegas board. 2 appealing pitchers here. 84.91 is very, very low prices for Hunter Brown and all his quality against the extremely gettable Mariners team that has a ton of strikeouts in the lineup. 27.8% strikeout rate for this confirmed Mariners lineup is super targetable. Brown has a 24.9% rate over 18 starts, 98 and a third innings this season. 4.39 ERA, but a 3.69 xFIP is definitely a reason to consider him as better than he has been on the surface. Stuff Plus likes the arsenal. He's been good at limiting home runs and limiting hard hits and exit velo extremely well. Hunter Brown is pitching like he is supposed to be pitching, like he was expected to be. Hits a couple bumps in the road every now and again. Had an atrocious meltdown all the way back on April 11th where he gave up 9 earned runs against Kansas City. But every start after that, he gave up 6 against Cleveland on April 30th. Had a good run of pretty good starts up until he ran into Minnesota back on July 6th, 2 starts ago. 7 earned runs on 12 hits, struck out 6, walked 1, gave up a homer. That one obviously not a good DFS start, but that Twins team is way better than this Mariners team. And he came right back after that one. Went 6 against Texas, 2 earned runs on 5 hits, struck out 5, gave up a homer, walked 2. It's an okay enough start. Luis Castillo for just 8,200 and 9,300 across sites. Similarly appealing. You could play the ownership game between these two. You could play the salary game. Obviously, Hunter Brown's got the better of the 2 matchups. But Castillo is more proven. Probably, I think we can still say a higher-end talent. He hasn't been great this season. 24.2% strikeouts is down a little bit. 3.53 ERA with a 3.82 xFIP. Giving up a 3.13% home run rate on elevated hard hit numbers. A lot of barrels, some mistakes mixed in there. Fairly aggressively fly ball trajectory, but still a very good swinging strike rate. Still a lot of ability and a lot of upside. 21.1% strikeout rate for this projected version of the Astros lineup. Doesn't look like we have the confirmed on that side. We do have the Mariners. So it is a low strikeout Astros lineup, but not quite as aggressively as it has been in years past. This same group of hitters last year was 20.1, so down a point, and that's missing a few of their extreme low strikeout bats. But the top-end hitters, it's the opposite of what we've said about some of the other teams that are low strikeout on the board. In this case, it's their lethal bats that are their lowest strikeout. Jordan Alvarez, Alex Bregman, Jose Altuve, even Shiner Diaz up toward the top, just 15% strikeouts from the catcher. Another appealing catcher in the heart of that lineup. Hitting cleanup, 4,300, 2,900, very cheap. 7 home runs, a 101 WRC plus. Again, just playable, but 15% strikeouts, 3.7% walks. Ton of balls in play. 45.2% hard hits to support the play. Like it a lot. So I think Castillo on his own in a vacuum, totally fine. But given the shape of the board and the opponent at 93 on FanDuel is a lot more difficult to play. At 82 on DraftKings, I think they just cooked all that into his price. So I think you can fire away over there. Not all that much hesitation on the DraftKings slate. It's a lot more difficult on FanDuel. Does give you good depth. 117 and a third in 20 starts. Pretty good depth. Good shot at a quality start. The win is definitely in question. If you're stacking Astros against Luis Castillo, it's all the players I named from 4 up. Altuve for 54.37, having a great Altuve kind of season. 306, 354, 461, 14 homers, 15 steals. It's exactly in line with Jose Altuve's Hall of Fame track. 4,200, 3,300 for Alex Bregman. He's up to 12 homers, a 158 ISO, 107 WRC+. Honestly, it looks a lot like it did last year. I think he's perfectly fine. I think he's downright cheap on DK. 33 on FanDuel is probably about right. This should probably be 48-ish, 47, 48. Jordan for 55, 41. Probably a couple $100 cheap on DraftKings. 296, 382, 531, a 235 ISO, 19 home runs. Tremendous hitter, one of the best bats in all of baseball. One of the best lefty power hitters in baseball, 9.34 in the home run model. Against the pitcher Castillo, who's given up a little bit of power this year. Alvarez has appeal. Again, it's probably a spot where we're just extracting pitching. But if you're going to a low-owned team for discounted prices, as we've talked about a bunch of times, I do like doing that with teams that I know are good teams and have star caliber players in the lineup, and the Astros fit that bill. John Singleton, Jeremy Pena, Jake Myers, Joey Loperfido, and Chas McCormick down the bottom of the projected lineup. Loses a little bit of appeal, but most of those guys, everybody except for Chas McCormick, who I still like, is above average for whatever their season has been for run in terms of run creation. You've got a little bit of power through all those guys. 7 home runs apiece for Diaz, Singleton, and Pena. 10 home runs so far for Jake Myers. Just 2 for Joey Loperfido, but he's only made 98 plate appearances. He's got a pretty good slash line, 273, 330, 420 over that. His created runs 13% better than average. So I think everybody down there is at worst mix and match swappable. Everybody's got a little bit of pop. Everybody's got a little bit of speed, maybe except for John Singleton. They've just been limited output-wise. Chas McCormick most particularly. Had a great breakout season last year after being a well-kept secret at the bottom of their lineup a couple seasons before that. He's very cheap now at 28-26. I haven't completely lost my faith based on 174 bad plate appearances. I think he can take a discount. If he moves up the lineup for some reason, so much the better. On the Mariners side, it really is more just about Hunter Brown in this one for me, but you can maybe draw some power from them. You've got Cal Raleigh over the magic number, 10.38. He's hit 20 home runs. He's got a 219 ISO, 108 WRC+. One of a few players now in this lineup that are hovering around the league average for run creation. Josh Rojas is one of those guys, dead at league average. He's got 4 home runs and 6 steals, a 244, 323 front end of the slash line. Mix and match caliber player with multi-position eligibility for a cheap price on FanDuel. Not so much on DK at 36, third base only. JP Crawford's on base percentage continues to be 76 points lower than it was last year, just a 95 WRC+. Hitting 209, just 9 home runs, 5 steals. Mix and match caliber shortstop, if that at this point. Julio Rodriguez, 9.8% barrels, 47.7% hard hits is okay. He's hit 10 home runs, stolen 18 bases, and 402. That's okay, but not nearly the star he's been. Garver gives you a second catcher option for 500 less on DraftKings, 400 less on FanDuel. Mix and match play there. 12 home runs. Sub Mendoza, sub 300 on base, 10 points worse than average for run creation. Jorge Polanco's been bad this season. Ty France has been mostly bad, hit for a little bit more power than expected, right at league average for run creation. In the past, he's been more of a contact and on-base guy. Just limited output, not that appealing of a first base option. Luke Raley's got a little bit of power, 10 home runs on the season, 6 stolen bases, a 177 ISO, 105 WRC+. Had a good year last year. 4,200, 2,800, he's playable enough at the bottom of the lineup. And then Victor Robles, really a mix and match piece. 8 stolen bases. If he continues to get on at a 368 clip, he'll be interesting. He's got a ton of speed. It's just he's never done this before and probably unlikely to continue. That's over just 71 plate appearances. If you're building a ton of Mariner stacks, Victor Robles should be in some of them. I'm not taking that away, but I see very little reason to build a ton of Mariner stacks on this slate. Let's crank through this last game. That one was pitching on both sides. Hunter Brown over Luis Castillo, and then Astros bats over Mariners bats. Mariners bats by far the least appealing thing in that game. This one, as I was alluding to at the beginning of the show, I think this is kind of maybe sneaky a little bit, at least for some runs in this late game. Nick Pivetta, it's all right. He's definitely pitched well this season. The Stuff Plus loves him at 136. I think that's the highest mark we've got on the entire slate. 4.18 ERA, though. 3.45 xFIP. He's got a 28.8% strikeout rate, but the Dodgers have at least, some ability to limit strikeouts and some superstar caliber hitters against. He's given up a 4.25% home run rate on the season, 10.1% barrels. Does that maybe find a little bit of appeal for some of these Dodger bats? 3 of whom are showing well above the magic number for home run upside. Kind of appealing. Going the other way, the Red Sox have been extremely frisky, if not downright good this year. Going up against Gavin Stone, who is good, not great. 19% strikeouts over 96 2/3 is very middle of the road, just league average-ish. 3.26 ERA is good, but a 4.08 xFIP is more revealing and just more, again, league average-ish. 11.3% swinging is good, but just a 26.3% CSW. With that, not as good. Has not been as gettable for power, premium contact, hard hits, exit velo, limits barrels fairly effectively, keeps the ball to a reasonable trajectory. I think you've got a better home run opportunity going the other way, going this way with Dodgers bats against Pavetta. But I think the Red Sox do have power upside, obviously, and just have significant run creation upside. So there's opportunity on both sides. That said, you can get either pitcher. It's just you're buying them in the mid-range price-wise. You're buying them in the mid-range projection-wise. You're not getting anything for your money, really, other than 2 tough matchups. And I guess the end-of-the-night opportunity, the late-night hammer opportunity, for whatever that's worth. But I think this is maybe a deceptively good spot for bats. Or at least, like, between everything, I think it works out more in favor of the bats. It just becomes a matter of, does either team actually go off, or are we talking about 4 or 5 runs? Jarren Duran, All-Star Game MVP, having a killer season, 10 home runs, 22 steals, a 342 on base, creating runs 23% better than average. Does everything really well. 5,600, 3,700, he's affordable. For his talent, that's perfectly fine to pay. 4,500, 3,000, second base and shortstop for David Hamilton, who has hit 5 home runs and stolen 23 bases. Created runs 5% better than average over just 214 plate appearances. Pretty high quality lefty bat off the top of the lineup. Definitely a good reason to consider some Red Sox stacks and some full depth Red Sox stacks. Yoshida, more appealing if he's hitting third, but I'll take him if he's hitting 5, 6, anywhere down that way as well. Willie Abreu, same thing. You swap those guys in the lineup. They maintain their appeal. I like both of those lefty bats. We've talked about Willie Abreu and his premium contact and his power output a number of times. And Yoshida, we've talked about a few times. He's scuffling a little bit this season compared to the hitter that he is. Not a real power bat, but a very good hitter, a traditional 3-hitter type. 260, 326, 370. There's more upside to come from him as long as he continues to do Masataka Yoshida kind of things, and he very much looks like he is. So for 3,600, 2,700, if he's the Red Sox 3-hitter against Gavin Stone, absolutely you can go there. Rafi Devers for 59.42 is pretty much full priced. 23 home runs, fantastic slash line, 304 ISO. It's Rafi Devers all the way and this season, 159 WRC plus. He's a superstar. 51.34 for Tyler O'Neill, maybe a little bit light. 16 home runs at 240 ISO, creating runs 27% better than average. And then Abreu for just 41.29. Again, very appealing lefty bat. 11.5% barrels, 48.1% hard hits. He's turned that into 8 home runs in just 248 chances. 215 ISO, 121 WRC plus. Cheap lefty power late in the lineup. Love it. Connor Wong maintaining a very strong slash line, 307, 367, 443. 8 home runs, not hitting for the same amount of power premium contact that we've gotten from him last year, but significantly better in terms of the slash and the run creation, 125 WRC plus. At worst, he's a mix and match catcher at a very good price. 3,027 for Dom Smith. Every now and then you get a home run and some predictivity, but he's not all that good of a hitter. 8.8% barrels is fine. 36.5% hard hits is fine. 5 home runs in 204 chances, not great. Ceddanne Rafaela, 4,200, 4 positions on FanDuel, 2 positions on DraftKings. Pretty good pricing for a guy with 11 homers and 11 stolen bases who's been a fairly relevant contributor in terms of run creation for this team. I know it doesn't show in the WRC+, but I guess in terms of counting stat run-wise, 45 runs scored and 52 RBIs from the bottom spot in the lineup over 347 with 11 homers and 11 steals. That adds up to a solid handful of DFS games of very high quality for a cheap price. So again, not in terms of his WRC+, but in terms of what actually adds up for DFS, that's not all that bad. And he's kind of just hidden down the bottom of the lineup. If you're going to the Dodgers, the top 4 hitters are all superstars, and they belong in as many of your stacks as you can get them into. 29 homers and 23 stolen bases for Shohei Ohtani with a 186 WRC plus and a 319 ISO. Will Smith, tremendous catcher with 15 home runs over 344 chances. He's expensive, but he's one of the best hitting catchers in all of baseball. Freddie Freeman is a star caliber first baseman with 14 homers. 291, 395, 492 were diminished a little bit in the slash line this year. It's bounced up and down between 290 and 300, between 395 and like 405, 410. Those are fantastic numbers if you're not familiar with baseball. Even if it's diminished a little from who he was last year before, still fantastic. 149 WRC plus as if that point needed proving. Teoscar Hernandez, 5,000, 3,400, your home run derby champ, 19 homers on the season, a 214 ISO. Pretty solid output for power, 14.6% barrels and 47.4% hard hits, makes it all believable. Pretty good power bat for just 5,000, 3,400 if you're stacking up Dodgers. Andy Pajas for 4,027 has 8 home runs and 313 chances, down to a 101 WRC plus, down to a 142 ISO, 10.2% barrels and 41.9% hard hits. It was bound to dip a little bit. What's up, gang? We're probably back. We might be back. Not totally sure. Figures. Last game. 3 hours into the show, the thing crashes. 19 of you still here hanging out. That's awfully nice of you to wait around for me to see if I could pop back on. Just to round things out, we were down at the end of the show there anyway. We were talking about the bottom of the Dodgers lineup. The only guy who was overperforming down there was Miguel Rojas. Everybody else was underperforming. But guys like Gavin Lux, James Outman, if they're in the lineup, do have talent, do have a little bit of individual upside. Mamba saying, is Boston and Oakland really low owned, though? I have pretty low numbers for both teams. I would imagine those teams are both pretty low owned. I like Oakland quite a bit here. I do think people will go to Oakland. It's no secret that Canning is targetable. But again, he did beat that team just recently, and they are the A's. But yeah, Boston, Oakland as a pairing, I think you'll be all right there. I don't think Boston's going to get all crazy popular. So that pitching board again was I don't have the file open now, and I'm not going to bother with it. I'm just going to end the show and jump and update things. But pitching projections obviously going to be up on the site. We had that really high quality mix of guys. Let me see if I can just get the file open real quick. Trey's looking at Oakland, Boston, Mets, KC with minis of New York, San Francisco, and Colorado. Not a bad selection of teams there, Trey. Now this wants to give me all sorts of multiple saved crash files. I just want to jump over here and show this. I got to remember I'm going to have to switch Jose Quintana again. So just to round things out and end the show awkwardly, Jack Flash up at the top of the board again, a little bit limited maybe by the low strikeout nature of his opponent, but very good. I believe in the median. I just don't know what the ceiling looks like. I think he gets passed on the way to a ceiling by some of these guys. Sonny Gray looks very high end against Atlanta. They are a threatening lineup, but certainly not as good as they've been in years past. Corbin Burns, extremely high end, just very high priced on FanDuel against Texas. Looks like a good option, probably going to go under owned for that big price tag. 91 on DraftKings makes him highly, highly playable. Garrett Cole, probably going to be the most popular pitcher on both sides. Tremendous matchup. Basically back on form, back to full depth. 96, 9,000. Price hasn't really caught up to the upside. Tanner Bybee, playable against San Diego, but another spot where it's low strikeout opponent. Hunter Brown, super appealing against Seattle. Love that option on both sides. Bassett against Detroit, very, very playable. More appealing on DK for just 81. That makes a ton of sense to me as an SP2. 91, I think he's a mix and match type on FanDuel. Waka, gettable against the White Sox. Not a high-end pitcher, but that's a really low-end opponent, so he could easily succeed there. Schwellenbach, I like a lot for value. Remember on DK, for the same price, you're going to have Minaya against the Marlins, though, at probably a very similar projection. Castillo, Pivetta, Evaldi, all playable mix and match type guys. Don't love the pricing, don't love the matchups. Waldron, Eflin, Sears, Stone. I'll even throw Canning into the mix and Cabrera into the mix. Are value-based mix and match type guys with low probability of success. One of that group of hitters will have a pretty good DFS day, or pitchers will have a pretty good DFS day. And then like another two will be like, okay, serviceable, depends on what you put them together with type values. That is it, gang. Was that not on the screen? Or did I? Whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyway, let me bail out on this thing. We will end the show here. Back on Monday for more. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. We'll see you.